Chapter 604. Miracle City's aerial army was different from any other country on the continent. Miracle City didn't breed large amounts of demon beasts and they didn't recruit large amounts of knights. Although the several kingdoms, the Forest of Chaos, and especially the underground purgatory world were good recruitment grounds, not only could they recruit human elites, they could also recruit forest races, and they could even create a stronger demon army. However, because Miracle City had only been built for a short period of time, how could they train a large army? But Miracle City's technology could make up for any deficiency. Miracle City's aerial force was purely made of technology. This army that had just appeared was made of three main forces. The first was the airship army. Chu Tian had already proposed the airship plan. Now with Miracle City's technology breaking through and becoming more proficient with the source energy array and source energy technology, they were able to smoothly build Miracle City's first-generation airship. Because time was limited, there were only two of them. The two airships were around 800 meters long and could be considered a supergiant. There were close to 1,000 weapons on the ships, and not only were there missile ports, there were also large amounts of source energy cannons, source energy fire cannons, source energy laser cannons, and etc. The airship was very large and had enough energy devices, so it had a very strong energy supply. This also increased their weapon and defense systems. Not only could they use energy-consuming weapons like the laser cannons, the space itself could form a strong shield. Even if it was surrounded by an army, it would be hard to break it in a short period of time. This was simply a floating fortress. The second was the fighter planes. The Black Thunder fighter planes were already being produced. With a speed that was 10 times the speed of sound, the Black Thunder planes were very nimble. The airships they carried could be sharp blades that could be stabbed out at any time. The third was the mech suit soldiers. Miracle Commerce's flying soldiers were different from the rest of the continent. They didn't ride flying demon beasts and didn't have the ability to fly, they were all wearing Miracle City's specially developed flying armor. These mech suit soldiers were the upgraded version of the Dark Hawk army in the northern militant country. Not only were they stronger, they also had the ability to fly and had a stronger shield, being able to block many true spirit realm attacks. The Golden Dragon Hawk army began to attack Miracle City. Miracle City's black barrier was made from undead towers. In the Forest of Chaos, the barrier's defense wasn't weak, but to the Big Dry Empire's army, Miracle City's barrier wasn't worth mentioning at all. They could break it in just a few minutes. This period of time wasn't without value. Miracle City's air force was fully released. Not only were there airships, fighter jets, and mecha soldiers here, but there were also anti-aircraft cannons and other types of heavy firearms installed on every mountain. Other than that, the Dragon Lord Nidhogg had brought several dozen wyverns from the Dragon's Ridge. The Elven City Lord and several representatives had also come. The Titans, Behemoths, Merepeople, Treants, and the peak experts of the Forest Alliance, as well as the peak experts of the other member cities had come to help. Miracle City was the heart of the Alliance. If Miracle City was destroyed, the Alliance would be finished. These cities had experienced the benefits of the Alliance, so they couldn't leave Miracle City. Therefore, when Miracle City was attacked, they would spare no effort to help. The Big Dry Empire's army and Miracle City's allied army began an intense battle. Jing Wuing understood how wrong he was. Miracle City's internal defenses were unimaginably strong, with several high-level Heaven Domain cultivators appearing. These fellows could be considered peak experts even in the empires, leading a large group of low-level Heaven Domain cultivators to charge in. The Dragon Hawk Knights weren't their match at all. Jing Wuing knew. These were the experts from the several giants of the forest. The Elven King, the Dragon Lord, the Titan's Thunder Fury, the Behemoth Burst Claw, and the Mermaid Bo Sha, if any one of them were taken out, they wouldn't be weaker than Jing Wuing, perhaps they would even be a bit stronger. The powers behind them were very strong. Even if each power sent out 15 to 20 Heaven Domain experts, the total number added up would be shocking. As for Jing Wuing thinking that Miracle City didn't have powerful soldiers and guards, that was a big mistake. Miracle City did not just have a strong air force, they also had over half of the Treants, with the leader of the Treants, the forest protector Cenarius. Cenarius' cultivation was not lower than the Elven King's, he was even stronger than the Elven King Lancelot by quite a bit. There were thousands of Treants. Even the weakest one was a peak true spirit cultivator. Jing Wu Ying's Golden Dragon Hawk army still had over 50,000 battle strength. Even if he spared no effort to win, it would still be a bitter victory where he died together. But he couldn't care about that right now. The Golden Dragon Hawk army was already in a weakened state. If Jing Wuing returned without any success, how could he face the Big Dry Emperor? Not to mention that for the Big Dry Empire, even if they lost 80,000 Golden Dragon Hawks, they couldn't lose face for the Empire. If they couldn't even take down a trivial Miracle City, the Big Dry Empire's dignity would be gone and they would suffer heavy losses. No matter the cost. Forcefully attack the city. Jing Wuing gave another order. Everything else wasn't important right now, they would forcefully attack Miracle City now. They would first destroy Miracle City before anything else. When the Golden Dragon Hawk army was prepared to attack Miracle City, something even more unexpected suddenly happened. A dazzling green light erupted from the center of Miracle City. A thick and warm energy slowly rose from the ground. Miracle City's inner city was protected by a green barrier. They never thought that Miracle City would have another barrier, so Jing Wuing quickly ordered the army to attack. After 4-5 rounds of attacks, everyone was shocked to find that the barrier was still standing and it wasn't damaged at all. What kind of barrier was this? It could compare to the Big Dry Empire's barrier. The core of the barrier was in the Miracle Gardens. This was a powerful energy released by the ancient Tree of Life. The ancient Tree of Life hadn't grown for long, but it was growing quite well. This thing in the great ancient era was an existence comparable to demons and gods. It was hard to imagine its strength when it was young. The Golden Dragon Hawk army was blocked outside the barrier. Miracle City was right in front of them, but they couldn't do anything. The various armies and Miracle City's army left Miracle City and began to fight with the Golden Dragon Hawk army. There was a powerful energy in the air and dense firepower on the ground, so the Golden Dragon Hawk army's numbers kept decreasing. Damn, retreat, retreat. Jing Wuing found that the number of knights had decreased to 30,000 and he knew that they couldn't keep fighting. The Dragon Hawk army would lose without a doubt, and if they kept fighting like this, they would be completely annihilated. Although he didn't want to admit it, there was no other way with the facts in front of them. The Golden Dragon Hawk army was defeated. The Big Dry Empire had lost. Meng Qinggu found through the smart brain that the Big Dry Empire's army was slowly retreating. She revealed a faint smile of victory. The enemy is currently retreating and the weapons on the outside have been prepared. It is estimated that they will launch another fierce attack while they are retreating. Should we order the entire army to chase after them? It's just a few defeated soldiers, there's no meaning in chasing after them. Chu Tian said to Meng Qinggu, us defeating the Big Dry Empire is an incredible matter. Instead of chasing after them, I think it's better to directly send the army to the Western Sea and take down the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago in one fell swoop. Meng Qinggu nodded, I also think this way. When Jing Wuing led the army to leave Miracle City, they were bombarded by Miracle City's weapons on the outside, increasing the casualties of the already small army. In the end, there were only 20,000 Golden Griffin Knights that escaped the Forest of Chaos. Miracle City didn't kill them all. The two space ships started moving and quickly headed for the Western Sea. Miracle City used all their strength to spread the news. The Forest Alliance easily defeating one of the Big Dry Empire's trump cards, the Golden Dragon Hawk army, was instantly spread across the forest and kingdom, even reaching the Western Sea. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago was in chaos. These fellows never would have dreamed that Miracle City would be this strong. Even the trump cards of the Empire were defeated, so wouldn't it be bad for the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago to rely on the Big Dry Empire? As expected. When this news spread across the Western Sea, there was a chain reaction. The subordinate powers of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago, like the large sea race tribes or the various sea kingdoms, all drew a line with the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom and went to rely on West Sea City. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King didn't even have time to be angry. A terrifying piece of news was sent over. Miracle City's army was currently heading for the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago with a large momentum and a large scale. Perhaps they were prepared to take advantage of their victory over the Big Dry Empire to eliminate the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago, the chess piece the Big Dry Empire had bought in the Western Sea. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom was in chaos, not having time to prepare for battle. Two incomparably huge airships slowly appeared in the sky above the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago. Hundreds of Black Thunder fighters were released, all of them circling around the two airships. Under Nidhogg's leadership, dozens of wyverns followed closely behind, each wyvern carrying a peak expert from a major faction. Bo Shah had mobilized an army of several 100,000 in West Sea City, personally leading them to seal off the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago. Even if the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom was stronger than the Eagle Burial Warring Kingdom, there was still a limit to their strength. How could the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom deal with this kind of large force and large characters? The 10,000 Flood Dragon King's usual aggressiveness and decisiveness disappeared without a trace. He quickly ordered the various regions to give up resistance and sent a messenger to contact Chu Tian, hoping to negotiate with Chu Tian and resolve this matter peacefully. The so-called people had to lower their heads under the eaves. Miracle City didn't even place the Big Dry Empire in their eyes. How could they be afraid of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago? If they didn't stop, they could just flatten them with a wave of bombardment. Chapter 605. Two airships slowly appeared in the sky above the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago like two metal fortresses. Although they were the first-generation airships produced by Miracle City, the outer appearance was a bit rough and ugly, with a clear feeling of being pieced together. However, the cannons and various weapons that were as dense as a forest were enough to create a large deterrent. Chu Tian stood on the deck looking down. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago was quite large. The total area was larger than the Grand Xia, the Zhou dynasty, and the Northern Militant Kingdom combined. However, more than 90% of it was made up of the sea, and the land was scattered in the form of islands without any pattern. At first glance, it looked as if someone had torn a piece of paper and scattered it on the surface of the water. Of course, the sea races didn't depend on the land that much. This was because the sea race didn't have to live on land, so to judge whether a power was strong or not, it had to be judged from the size of the sea. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom did not just have the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago, they also had several subordinate powers in the surrounding archipelago. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago had over 200 million sea race people. The West Sea City only had 50-60 million sea race people. The main ruling race of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago were the Flood Dragon people. They were the strongest fighting race in the Western Sea. After the sea race's Deep Blue Empire disintegrated, the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago didn't have any opponents in the Western Sea. Chu Tian looked over the map Smart Brain created. It's too hard to attack these 1,000 islands one by one, it'll take quite a bit of effort. I don't think there's a need for this, let's go to the main island. Miracle City's airships were designed to be able to pass through astral winds and travel through the sky. If the airships flew over 1,000 kilometers in the air, the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago wouldn't be able to do anything. They could only wait for the airships to land on the main island and launch an attack. Miracle City didn't do this. The two airships were less than 5,000 meters in the air, flying over the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago like this. The outer islands of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago were alerted by the invaders, and countless elite kingdom soldiers riding flying demon beasts or sea flood dragons rose from the sea and islands to block the airships. The powerful shields of the two airships blocked these attacks. The terrifying weapon systems and the flying dragons formed a defensive force that completely destroyed the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom's defenses. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom's weak air force was like an egg striking a rock against the Forest Alliance. Chu Tian just swaggered through the 10,000 Flood Dragon archipelago, using a strong and overbearing method to tear through the defenses, breaking through the enchantment and illusion arrays. Any kind of defense was nothing in front of Miracle City's alliance army. The strength of the Forest Alliance was deeply imprinted in the hearts of every 10,000 Flood Dragon country member, making it so that they wouldn't dare go against the Forest Alliance in the future. The two spaceships charged into the territorial waters of the main island. Dozens of wall breakers were fired and destroyed the main island's barrier first. At this time, all the weapons were aimed. As long as Chu Tian gave the order, the entire main island would instantly welcome a catastrophic bombardment. Stop! The 10,000 Flood Dragon King stepped on a dark blue giant flood dragon. He finally couldn't hold it in any longer and rushed out of the ocean into the air. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King never thought that Miracle City's army would kill their way to the main island so quickly. This meant that the outer defenses didn't have any effect at all. It was too terrifying. This army indeed possessed the combat strength of an empire. It was no wonder the 80,000 Big Dry Empire's Golden Dragon Hawk Knights returned in defeat. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King was filled with regret. If he knew that Miracle City had this kind of power, even if he had more courage, he wouldn't have dared to ally with the Big Dry Empire to deal with the Forest Alliance. Although the Big Dry Empire was very strong, they were still several 100,000 kilometers away. The Forest Alliance was like a neighbor, they could deal with them at any time. Could they hope for the Big Dry Empire to save them? If the Big Dry Empire really came, they would just be collecting corpses for the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King Lucas calmed himself down and used his spirit energy to make his voice penetrate, allowing the people inside the spaceships to hear him clearly. This is a misunderstanding, we are willing to explain. Chu Tian's goal had already been achieved. Miracle City and the Forest Alliance didn't want to destroy the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom wasn't weak, they had a large population, and a large army. This was an important existence to maintain balance, so if this large power collapsed, it would cause chaos that would spread to the entire Western Sea. This was not good for Chu Tian. Since the 10,000 Flood Dragon King wants to talk, then let's have a good talk. Chu Tian brought the 4 forest giants and the Western Sea City Lord Bo Sha, directly landing on the main island from the spaceship. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King Lucas instantly felt a strong pressure coming at him. He knew that the people beside Chu Tian were not ordinary people. There were several dozen wyverns circling around, and each wyvern had a peak expert of the Forest Alliance on their back, with many Heaven Domain realm existences among them. This kind of lineup wasn't something an empire-level power could casually send out. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King Lucas admitted defeat this time. Fellow city lords, please calm your anger. This king has no intention of going against the Forest Alliance. It was the Big Dry Empire's strength that threatened the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom, forcing us to make this choice. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago and the Forest Alliance haven't had any large conflicts or casualties, so it's better to let this matter go. This king can guarantee that the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom's army will never appear on the western coast. The king really knows how to sail with the wind. Chu Tian said with a laugh, the matter of sending people to the Western Sea to capture us and extort West Sea City a few days ago, has the king forgotten already? Don't tell me this is also the Big Dry Empire's decree. This. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King Lucas instantly revealed an awkward expression. He then said with a serious expression, what does the city lord want? Chu Tian said without any hesitation, cede the land. Surrender. Lucas' expression froze. He was definitely going to surrender. Cede the land? What land? Chu Tian said without any politeness, the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom cannot use any methods or force to take back the subordinate kingdoms and families that have surrendered to West Sea City. Other than that, the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago must give 20 guard islands to the Forest Alliance to build a defensive line and base on the sea to prevent you from going back on your word. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King's expression became very ugly. The tribute the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom gave to the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago every year was not a small number. With such a large amount of income, how could they just give it up like this? As for ceding 20 guard islands, that was even more impossible. The 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago had thousands of islands, so it wasn't possible to randomly pick an island to become a guard island. For every island to become a guard island, the most important condition was its size and location. If they gave 20 guard islands to the Forest Alliance at the same time, wouldn't the 10,000 Flood Dragon King Lucas be burying a bomb in his territory that could blow up the entire 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago at any time? Lucas couldn't accept these two conditions no matter what. Of course, the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago will also benefit from this disaster. I will allow you to join the Forest Alliance and enjoy the resources and support of the Forest Alliance. We are even prepared to turn the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago into a base and center for developing the deep sea. Chu Tian knew the principle of using a carrot and a stick together. There is no retreat or discussion on this matter. You only have 5 minutes to consider. If the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago can't accept it, then we can only use our own method to solve the problem. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King Lucas was in a complex mental struggle. Although Chu Tian's promise was very tempting, the price to pay was too high. If Lucas nodded now, then half of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago would belong to the Forest Alliance or Miracle City. This was something that the 10,000 Flood Dragon King, who had ruled over a region for a long time, could not easily accept. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King's eyes swept over the warships floating in the air and finally made a decision: I accept. No matter how excessive the Forest Alliance's request was, the 10,000 Flood Dragon King had no choice but to lower his head under the eaves. Otherwise, with the Forest Alliance's current military strength, it wasn't impossible for them to raise the main island of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago to the ground. The most important thing was, after this lesson, the 10,000 Flood Dragon King deeply understood the strength of the Forest Alliance and their unbelievable technology. Although he had to pay a large price to surrender this time, the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago would become the center of the deep sea expansion. Lose some sea territory. Then he would seize more sea territory. Lose several islands. Then he would occupy more islands. The 10,000 Flood Dragon King could imagine that with the 10,000 Flood Dragon Warring Kingdom's military and the Forest Alliance's powerful technology, they would be unstoppable in the Western Sea. Chu Tian was very satisfied with Lucas's sensible approach. This time, not only did the Great Qian Empire not gain any benefits, but they had also lost a large number of elites. They had also lost the most important pawn in the West Sea. What was the Big Dry Empire's goal in roping in the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago? Wasn't it because the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago was close to the Forest Alliance, so the Big Dry Empire could use it as a springboard to deal with the Forest Alliance? The Big Dry Empire's plan had completely failed and the Empire's dignity had been trampled on like never before. Chu Tian could imagine the Big Dry Emperor's flustered and furious appearance. Meng Qinggu informed him through the communication channel, Chu Tian, I've received news that the rulers of the various regions are about to arrive in Miracle City. I think we should go back and prepare as soon as possible. Is that so? They're here this quickly. They've come at the right time. Miracle City had just defeated the Big Dry Empire, so their morale was at its peak. Chu Tian ordered, City Lord Bo Sha, I'll leave the matters of the 10,000 Flood Dragon Archipelago to you. Bo Sha was the biggest winner of this conflict, City Lord can be assured and return. With this old lady here, there won't be any mistakes. Alright, let's go. Chu Tian led the large army back to Miracle City. The Miracle Summit held in Miracle City this time had a very important meaning. This was Miracle City's first step out of the forest of chaos and onto the continent. It was an unprecedented opportunity to soar forward. Chapter 606. This glorious victory had just ended. The Miracle Summit ushered in another historical moment for Miracle City. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were strolling through a corridor in the castle, inspecting their city. From this position and height, they could see over half of Miracle City. In order to smoothly hold the Miracle Summit, Miracle City had spent quite a bit of effort. All kinds of giant image transfer mirrors had already been placed in every corner of the city, and each image transfer mirror was showing advertisements. The fresh flowers from the Flower Fairy's garden made most of the city beautiful. Several dozen miracle airships were floating in the air with giant banners hanging from them. There were 2 battleships quietly floating in the air, and the busy workers in the city were all wearing Miracle City's most advanced mecha suits. They were currently using the mecha suits to fly, and they were like worker bees in a beehive, busying themselves everywhere, going up and down. Who would have thought that this large city filled with a futuristic style would still be a barren and weak city that was almost destroyed by internal strife a year ago? Chu Tian was very satisfied with the scene in front of him. It's a good thing that Miracle City wasn't heavily damaged during the Big Dry Empire's attack. Otherwise, if I were to welcome the various emperors in a tattered Miracle City, I wouldn't have any face at all. Meng Yingying was a bit restless as she nervously asked, "Will there be a problem if we invite all these large characters? These are all the top figures of the continent. If they join hands and force us in a tyrannical manner, are we going to offend all of them?" Meng Yingying's worries weren't without reason. A single Big Dry Empire already made Miracle City feel a large amount of pressure. If these emperors came to Miracle City and saw Miracle City's technology, they would be filled with greed and would work together to force Chu Tian to call out Miracle City. How would Chu Tian deal with this situation? Send them all away. That would be the same as becoming enemies with the entire continent. Miracle City was already struggling to deal with an empire. If this many empire-level powers attacked at the same time, perhaps they would be destroyed overnight. Even though they are all martial monarchs, they might have conflicts with one another, like the Wind Moon Empire and the Sky-Scorching Empire, or they might never have any contact with one another, like the Dragon Territory, the Dark Night Forest, the Underworld Ocean, etc. Impossible. Chu Tian held Meng Yingying's small hand. Believe me, after this matter is over, Miracle Commerce's influence will expand to every corner of the mainland. Meng Yingying nodded her head vigorously. No matter how unreliable it is, if it's you doing it, I believe you can do it. Chu Tian affectionately rubbed Yingying's nose. My dear little Yingying is quite confident in me. Since that's the case, as your fiancé, how could I let you have 100,000? Meng Yingying had goosebumps all over her body. Disgusting. Chu Tian, we've finished setting up the venue. The young Miss voice came from the communication device. Pay attention, the radar has detected several powerful energy fluctuations approaching. I think it must be the martial monarchs of the various countries coming. When you see these emperors, you have to control your temper and properly receive them, don't neglect them. Relax, elder sister. Meng Yingying took the communication device and said, I'll be watching from the side, there definitely won't be any problems. There was an explosion in the sky at this time. Within Miracle City's vision, there were 9 powerful demon beasts that stepped through the air, quickly arriving. They had a very special appearance. They had the head of a lion, the antlers of a deer, the eyes of a tiger, the body of an elk, the scales of a dragon, and the tail of an ox. Their bodies were as white as jade and their 4 feet were like whirlwinds. Not only did they have a strong aura, they were also very fast. Meng Yingying was stunned. These are Qilins. Jade Qilins. Chu Tian knew there were many kinds of Qilins. The Jade Qilin wasn't the strongest Qilin, but it was the most beautiful one. Not to mention that strength was relative, at least these 9 Qilins were all level 4, 9 Qilins pulling a carriage, only the peak characters of the continent have this ability. Meng Yingying revealed a look of envy. This must be the Wind Moon Empire's Wind Moon Empress. The Qilin carriage slowly approached Miracle City. They didn't even have time to land. Several graceful beauty that could cause the downfall of a city flew out first, landing on the ground like feathers. Each one of them was covered in a powerful aura. They were all heaven domain realm experts. But at this moment, they were kneeling on one knee and respectfully said, "Greetings to the Wind Moon Empress." The beast carriage slowly opened. A red-clothed beauty floated out of the beast carriage. This was a girl that people couldn't tell her age at all. She had the coquettishness of a 10-year-old girl, the elegance of a 20-year-old girl, and the sensibility of a 30-year-old girl, as well as the majesty of an older woman. Her face was covered in a veil, but it didn't have the effect of covering her face, rather it made her look even more mysterious. Miracle City truly lives up to its reputation. The Wind Moon Empress saw that Miracle City was filled with singing and dancing. There were strange transportation tools everywhere and most of the things she had never seen before. This Empress heard that the Big Dry Empire sent an 80,000 Golden Dragon Hawk army to attack Miracle City a few days ago. This Big Dry Emperor really doesn't have any bearing, it's just that we didn't invite him. Why is he so angry? A lazy voice rang out at this time. The Wind Moon Empress is right. Not only does he not have any bearing, his army is also pitifully weak. How audacious. They actually dared to say the Empire's army was weak? Did they forget that the Wind Moon Empire was a power on the same level as the Big Dry Empire? If they said the Big Dry Empire's army was weak, didn't that mean the Wind Moon Empire's army wasn't that strong? When the Wind Moon Empress looked over at the voice, she saw a very young man walking over. He gave a graceful bow. "The continent's #1 Empress, your bearing is even more stunning than the rumors say." Miracle City's City Lord, Miracle Commerce's Chairman, Forest Alliance's Chairman, Chu Tian. The Wind Moon Empress looked at Chu Tian with a smile that was not dignified, charming and dignified. She used a magnetic and enticing voice to say, "I like your things very much, how about you come to the Wind Moon Empire? I'll give you the title of Great Sage, Great Prime Minister, Imperial Teacher, and King, what do you think?" Fuck, this woman had sealed everything that could be sealed and they were all of the highest level. Did she want Chu Tian to be below one person and above billions of people in the Wind Moon Empire? "I'm very willing to accept these titles, but..." Chu Tian shook his head and said, "My fiancée will be jealous. She is a little tigress, I don't dare offend her." Meng Yingying was indeed a bit jealous, but hearing Chu Tian say this, she was instantly filled with rage. "Empress, don't listen to his nonsense." The Wind Moon Empress giggled. City Lord Chu Tian really is a strange person. Chu Tian saw that this period was over and he immediately said to the Wind Moon Empress, "Miracle City's large meeting place has already been prepared. I ask the Empress to take a look around Miracle City and wait for the others to arrive before holding the meeting." The Wind Moon Empress was very interested in Miracle City. Miracle City had changed a lot compared to a year ago and now all kinds of facilities were very complete. Whether it was a normal citizen or a peak emperor like the Empress, as long as they came here, they would be able to enjoy themselves to the point of forgetting home. After around an hour, a beast carriage pulled by 9 phoenixes appeared in the sky. The phoenixes released a powerful energy that turned half the sky red. It didn't need to be said to know that the Heaven-Burning Empire's Heaven-Burning Emperor had come. 9 was the limit, 9 represented supremacy. Therefore whether it was the Wind Moon Empress or the Heaven-Burning Emperor, their carriages were pulled by 9 strong immortal beasts. Only this kind of carriage could highlight their status. The Burning Heaven Emperor was a robust middle-aged man with a head of fiery red hair. He let out a hearty laugh as soon as he appeared and said, "I heard that Miracle City has a descendant of the immortal bird race. Is this true?" Chu Tian was stunned hearing this. Could the Heaven-Burning Emperor be referring to Nangong Yun? "That's right, it's Nangong." The Heaven-Burning Emperor said with a nod, "The Nangong family's ancestor came from the same branch as us, only the other families have already disappeared and the Nangong family has become a small family in a small country. I never thought that the Nangong family's descendant would flourish in your hands." Chu Tian suspected that the Heaven-Burning Emperor wanted to steal people from Miracle City. After all, Nangong Yun and many members of the Nangong family had high positions in the company. If the heaven-burning emperor took back the Nangong family, he might use this to steal secrets. Nangong Yun has a lot of potential and is now an important member of miracle commerce. With this much potential, how about becoming my student? What do you think? This matter will depend on Nangong Yun's own thoughts. Alright, this emperor will personally ask him later. Meng Yingying saw Chu Tian send the heaven-burning emperor away and said in a worried voice, Nangong wouldn't really be taken away by him, right? How is that possible? Chu Tian rolled his eyes, not to mention Nangong's relationship with us. What the heaven-burning empire can give to Nangong, our miracle city can give her 10 times that. Not to mention that Nangong is learning the great Nirvana scripture I taught her. After the heaven-burning emperor saw this cultivation technique, it would be good if he didn't take Nangong Yun as his master. Would he still dare to take a disciple? Wind Moon and Burning Heaven, the two human empire emperors arrived first. In the following period of time, several emperors arrived. There was the Wild Beast Empire's Wild Beast Emperor, the Dark Night Elven King and Dark Night Forest's Council Chairman, the Netherworld Sea's Nether King, the Dragon Territory's Great Elder, and etc. In a single day. These characters that could shake the continent with a stomp of their feet had all gathered in Miracle City. The Miracle Summit was about to officially begin. Chapter 607. The Wind Moon Empress, the Heaven-Burning Emperor, the Wild Beast Emperor, the Dark Night Elven King, the Netherworld Sea Nether King, the Dragon Territory Great Elder, two human emperors, a Spirit Beast Emperor, the highest leader of the elves, the highest leader of the undead, and the highest leader of the dragon race. They had all settled down in Miracle City. There were many complicated conflicts between the emperors. For example, the Wild Beast Empire and the Dark Night Forest were enemies, the Wild Beast Empire and the Wind Moon Empire were enemies, the Heaven Burning Empire and the Dark Night Forest were enemies, the Netherworld Sea and the Dragon Territory often fought. The Dragon Territory had a tense relationship with the Wind Moon Empire and the Heaven Burning Empire, and the Heaven Burning Empire and Wind Moon Empire were competitors. It was just like what Chu Tian thought. It was impossible for these fellows to work together. The conflicts and contradictions between them had been slowly accumulated over hundreds of years or even longer. They did not trust each other at all. Chu Tian was worried that they would fight, so he separated them. He had Nidhogg receive the Dragon Race's Great Elder, the Wood Elf King Lancelot receive the Dark Night Elven King, and Burst Claw receive the Wild Beast Emperor, separating them to avoid conflicts. The emperors stayed in Miracle City for a day or two. They all had a better understanding of Miracle City's abilities. They knew that in this remote place, there was actually a power that wasn't inferior to an empire-level power being born. These emperors and overlords had already watched and played. Then it was time for the Miracle Summit to begin. Greetings to the respected Wind Moon Empress. 3 dark golden figures arrived in front of the Wind Moon Empress and they respectfully bowed. The Wind Moon Empress looked at these people and her eyes lit up. Of course the Wind Moon Empress could see that these people weren't living people at all, they were just puppets. What was especially shocking was that these puppets seemed very strong. Each one was around the peak 9th true spirit layer. Other than that, these puppets that didn't have any life and didn't have any consciousness, they could interact with people normally. This was a bit hard to believe. The Wind Moon Empress asked, "What are you?" One of the dark golden figures replied, "We are the divine servants refined by Sir City Lord. We were originally normaline corpses, but because we were strengthened by the divine blood, we became like this. The divine servants are puppets without any thoughts, but because we have Miracle City's smart brain, they can control themselves." Unbelievable. Thank you for the compliment, Your Majesty. The divine servant respectfully said, "The Miracle Summit is about to begin and the Miracle Great Hall has been prepared. We invite the Empress to enter." The 2 divine servants brought the Empress to a luxuriously decorated hotel. The Wind Moon Empress slightly raised her brows. Could the Miracle Summit be held in a large hotel? The Wind Moon Empress was used to surprises in Miracle City over the past 2 days. She never thought that such an important meeting in Miracle City would be held in this kind of hotel. This was a bit too small. Disappointment was disappointment. The Wind Moon Empress didn't care too much. She knew that a large reason Miracle City held the Miracle Summit was because of the pressure from the empires on the continent. After all, Miracle City's existence was becoming more and more eye-catching. With this much powerful technology, it was hard for Miracle City to keep it. Since he was in such a hurry, he naturally had to be a little careless. When the Wind Moon Empress walked into the Miracle Grand Hotel, there were mechanical puppets coming and going. These robots were very nimble and could talk. Could they be puppets? The divine servant explained on the side, these are robots developed by Miracle Commerce using mechanical techniques. They don't have any smart cores in their bodies and their actions are all controlled by Miracle City's central smart brain. The Wind Moon Empress asked, robots? What can they do? The divine servant replied, Miracle Commerce will focus on researching robots in the next few years, including battle robots, service robots, and research robots. They will be used on the battlefield, in daily life, in research, and in many other fields. The robots are produced quickly, they are strong, and they don't get tired. They are managed in a unified manner and can be updated with Miracle City's newest technology and weapons, therefore they have a very high value. Chu Tian Commerce controlled large amounts of resources. Whether it was outer space, underground, in the forest, in the sea, or in other places. Chu Tian could mine the strongest high-level metal to mass-produce robots. Once these robots were produced, even a true spirit cultivator would find it hard to destroy them. Then they would be equipped with energy swords, energy shields, and various weapons. Wasn't Miracle City's army not strong enough? Didn't Miracle City not have enough time to train? When the robot army formed in the future, there would be no need for recruitment, no need for cultivation, and no need for training. Each one of them could fly in the sky, they wouldn't get tired, and they would be absolutely loyal. What soldiers were better than robots? The Wind Moon Empress didn't think this much right now. The three divine servants led the Wind Moon Empress to a luxurious room and several robot attendants brought out various top-quality delicacies, the highest quality elven tea, and the fairy wine brewed by the flower fairies. The Wind Moon Empress sat down on a large sofa. Is this the waiting area? No, Your Majesty. A divine servant explained, this is where you will be holding the meeting. The Wind Moon Empress tasted a cup of fairy wine. When the divine servant said this, her expression turned strange. Her eyes looked around and there wasn't a single person here. There were all kinds of exquisite decorations and plants, as well as a balcony garden and an indoor swimming pool on the other side. How could this kind of quiet and comfortable place be a meeting place? Then again, Chu Tian and the others weren't here. The city lord has already arranged everything. When the divine servant said this, he suddenly took out a helmet from who knows where. This helmet looked very beautiful and there were several dozen crystals embedded in it. The Wind Moon Empress could feel that these were spiritual attributed crystals. I ask Your Majesty to put on the spiritual helmet and enter the Miracle Summit's main venue. Put on the helmet. Enter the Miracle Summit's main venue. The Wind Moon Empress was stunned for a few seconds, but she soon realized something. She couldn't avoid experiencing the arena, the spiritual library, and etc. She knew that Miracle City's spiritual technology could create a spiritual world out of thin air. So it was like this. The Miracle Summit's main venue was in the spiritual space. This brat Chu Tian really made people feel surprised. The Wind Moon Empress placed the helmet on her head. When the source energy array on the helmet was activated, a pure energy surrounded the Wind Moon Empress. This kind of strong spiritual energy, if the Wind Moon Empress wanted to resist it, it wouldn't affect her at all. However, the Wind Moon Empress completely released her spiritual defenses, allowing it to enter the deepest part of her mind. Closing her eyes. Opening her eyes. In the blink of an eye. The Wind Moon Empress found that she was standing on the back of a giant crystal dragon. She was surrounded by a field that surpassed the limits of a human's imagination. There were rows and rows of terrace stands that were neatly arranged like a matrix, covering one's field of vision like a ladder to heaven. Each one was filled with people. There was a beautiful garden in the center of the field. A voice rang out from the center of the field at this time. The one appearing in the large field is the #1 Empress of the continent. We welcome your Majesty to the grand meeting. We ask your Majesty to sit as soon as you enter. A tsunami of cheers erupted from the surroundings. That dense crowd of people was just like an ocean. The Wind Moon Empress was someone who had experienced a large scene before, so she didn't lose her composure. Rather, she calmly waved her hand and the giant dragon circled the Wind Moon Empress before finally landing on a high platform in the center of the field. Several magnificent thrones were placed here. The 2 chairmen of Miracle Commerce were sitting on 2 of the thrones and the other thrones were all reserved for the emperors. The Wind Moon Empress was sitting on one of the thrones. At this time, the others also arrived. Each person was being carried by a giant majestic beast. After circling the field once, they finally landed on the center of the field and sat down. Alright, since all the majesties have arrived, let's start the conference. Chu Tian stood up and introduced, all the majesties are peak characters of the continent, so I don't need to waste my breath to introduce everyone. I will introduce everyone to the majesties here. They were also very curious. There was a sea of people around, there were at least several million people. There had never been a person or power that could gather this many people together for a conference. All the brothers and sisters here have come from various parts of the alliance. This area is from the Great Summer Country, this area is from the Great Zhou Country, this area is from the Great Wei Country, as well as the Northern Militant Country, West Chu Country, and West Yan Country. There are a total of 4 million people from the Kingdom Alliance. Chu Tian pointed to the other side. This side was filled with strange-looking forest races. These are from the Eternal Forest, Savage Highlands, Giant Mountain, Dragon's Ridge, Western Sea, Silver Moon City, Emerald City, Four Direction City. There are a total of 3 million people from the Forest Alliance here. Chu Tian gave a simple introduction. That's right, for this Miracle Summit, there are a total of 7 million people here. We will also be broadcasting the entire event, allowing the billions of people from the various cities of the Forest Kingdom to see this live. Today's conference will not only witness the prosperity of the Alliance, it will also witness the powerful technology of Miracle Commerce, as well as the beginning of the continent's source energy technology. Hong! The applause was like a flood coming from all directions. No matter who it was that saw this scene, they would be shocked. Even if it was an emperor, even if it was an overlord. The Wind Moon Empress was lying down in a quiet room, but she had come to this dreamlike conference. This kind of technology, this kind of science, made people gasp in amazement. Chapter 608. The Miracle Summit was indeed held in a rush, but that didn't mean it was done carelessly. Before Chu Tian announced the Miracle Summit, Miracle Commerce had already spent a large amount of time on the spiritual aspect. Most of the important cities in the forest and the kingdom had built arenas and trial fields. These arenas and trial fields had already become one of the most important entertainment areas for the Alliance members, bringing Miracle Commerce several tens of millions of source stones every month. Miracle Commerce's ambition in the spiritual domain was not as simple as building arenas and trial fields. Everything they were doing now was just building a foundation for the spiritual network. Therefore, after the Miracle Summit was held, people could come to their cities through the spiritual network and enter the conference itself. This was because Miracle Commerce had been working hard in this domain for a long time. Chu Tian announced, "We invite the Miracle Commerce Vice Chairman, Miracle City's Vice City Lord, and the Alliance's Vice Speaker, young Miss Meng Qinggu to preside over this conference. Everyone welcome her." The citizens of the various cities all let out excited cheers. Meng Qinggu was the one in charge of Miracle City, Miracle Commerce, and the Alliance. Meng Qinggu was smart and capable, everyone could see it with their own eyes. If Chu Tian did not have a capable assistant like Meng Qinggu, Miracle Commerce would not have been able to develop to this point. Not to mention that Meng Qinggu herself was a beauty that could cause the downfall of a country, therefore she was an idol in every city and city in the alliance. Meng Qinggu was an experienced person, so no matter how big the scene was, she wouldn't have stage fright. She first said a large amount of welcoming words to Miracle Commerce before entering the main topic. In this Miracle City Summit, we will first announce a very important product. This product has been developed by Miracle Commerce for a year and has finally stabilized. Actually, I think many people have already guessed it, that's right. It is the spiritual helmet and the spiritual network. Spiritual helmet. Spiritual network. The several Emperor-level characters could feel the benefits of the spiritual helmet. This Miracle Summit was carried out through the spiritual network. After wearing the spiritual helmet, people from all over the world could gather in one place and interact with each other on a spiritual level. However, there were still many things they didn't understand about the spiritual helmet. They didn't know how much potential this product had. Let us first look at the data released by the Yunsex laboratory. Meng Qinggu raised her hand and a giant screen appeared in the middle of the hall. There was a dense amount of research data appearing on it. There were detailed records of wind, fire, water, earth, light, darkness, thunder, and other kinds of energy, as well as their attenuation data. As we all know, any conventional energy in the world will decay, weaken, and be consumed as it travels through time and space. This is because all energy is built on the foundation of spacetime, so when spacetime changes, these energies will also change. As Meng Qinggu spoke, she waved her hand gently and the data of the mental energy research appeared. Through our research, we discovered that the transmission of mental energy is not affected by time and space. Spiritual energy could directly affect the target across space, and spiritual energy could resist the flow of time. This important discovery means that mental energy is an independent energy that is on the same level as space and time. Therefore, the spiritual technology has a very long development prospect. The Dark Knight Elven King couldn't help asking, then what are the benefits? Our spiritual helmets won't be affected by spatial distance. Simply put, as long as we build a spiritual world transmitter in Miracle City, we can enter the spiritual world at any time and any place on the continent as long as we have a helmet with this function. Secondly, the flow of time in the spiritual world is different from the real world. A day in the real world can be 10 days, 20 days, or even longer in the spiritual world. This means that once the spiritual helmet is released, our continent will enter the spiritual network era. I believe that as long as everyone here works together with Miracle City, our spiritual network will be able to cover the entire continent in a short period of time. Too shocking. A single spiritual helmet could connect all the intelligent beings on the continent. Spiritual communication could cross space and even time. This had the chance to become an even higher level communication method. In order to allow the spiritual network era to come, Miracle Commerce will give everyone a large gift. At this point, Meng Qinggu suddenly waved her hand and a huge map slowly unfurled in the sky. When everyone looked at it, they were all shocked to discover that it was actually a map of a continent. Even though the scale was not too big, the geographical structure and shape were full of craftsmanship. This was definitely not a continent formed naturally, but rather a world created by countless artists. This is the continent Miracle Commerce worked with the Flower Fairies, over 100,000 employees, and over 100 smart brains. We have spent a large amount of manpower and resources to create this continent. We have named it the Miracle Continent. The Miracle Continent has an area of 5 million square kilometers, with a total of 661 cities that are still being expanded. Each area of the Miracle Continent has been carefully designed and created by us, with each city being able to hold over 10 million people. Not only are there large amounts of entertainment facilities, there are also countless arenas, trial fields, libraries, and etc., as well as a very mature business system. This is a world filled with fantasies. Each citizen of the continent will be able to enjoy things they can't experience in real life, learning the most advanced knowledge, interacting with people from all over the world, and experiencing the most exciting adventures. That's right, this is the most important product Miracle Commerce has released. It is a world of entertainment, leisure, adventure, social interaction, business, learning, and even research. The various emperors were all present. Everyone was astonished by this. Miracle Commerce had created a giant virtual world out of thin air, allowing the people of all the countries on the continent to come here through their spiritual connections. There was no cost to anything in the spiritual world. There were many things that couldn't be experienced in the real world, but there were countless things in the virtual world. The Miracle Continent had a total of 661 cities, and it was very convenient to travel between them because each city in the spiritual world was filled with transport points. You could teleport within the city and you could teleport between cities, so it was very convenient to communicate with each other in the spiritual world. This could be said to be a giant social platform that could hold over 10 billion people on the continent. This was the significance of the spiritual connection. Once this kind of large platform that spanned across races and countries was formed, there would be over 10 billion people living in it. This would create a large economic value. Even if the Miracle Continent's spiritual connection brought about business, economics, education, and entertainment, just selling helmets would create a large amount of income. Once the spiritual connection covers the entire continent, it will bring an unimaginable change to our lives. This is the progress of an era and the progress of history. Everyone here is a witness. Meng Qingguo then announced, but Miracle Commerce has no intention of relying on this technology to dominate the continent. Miracle Commerce's philosophy will always be an open platform and a win-win situation. The temptation of this kind of superior technology was something that no one could resist. Miracle Commerce wanted to promote their products and technology to the entire continent, so they had to give the cake to others. Otherwise, with Miracle Commerce's current strength, they wouldn't even have time to spread their technology before they would be destroyed by the combined efforts of others. Meng Qingguo announced in a generous voice, the second major matter of this Miracle Summit is that Miracle Commerce will be opening their platform. We are prepared to share the spiritual helmets technology and even the spiritual spaces technology with everyone and discuss the possibility of cooperation. When this was said, the emperors were shocked. Although they could guess Miracle Commerce's thoughts, Meng Qingguo directly saying it out like this kind of courage still shocked them. After all, Miracle Commerce had just matured this kind of technology and they didn't even have time to harvest the fruits. Were they willing to give the fruits to others? But it was still a bit too early to be shocked. Actually, it's not just the spiritual technology. Meng Qingguo then announced, we have normal communication technology, energy technology, weapon technology, and many other fields, all of them are open to cooperation. In the future, as our cooperation grows closer, these technologies will be open to our allies sooner or later. The meaning behind her words was, whoever had a good relationship with Miracle City would be able to obtain more technology. So, if they wanted Miracle City's technology, they had to quickly establish a good relationship with Miracle City. Other than that, regarding the exploration of outer space and the underground world, Miracle City and the large alliances have made a decision. Meng Qingguo said to the emperors present, we are willing to establish a joint venture in your country or region to explore beyond the heavens or underground. We will support you in exploring beyond the heavens or the underground world and excavating resources, so as to strengthen the development of external resources. This was also a very attractive condition. Whether it was outer space or underground, they were all rich in rare resources. These empire-level powers were already very strong, so if they established this kind of cooperation, they would be able to directly enter the sky and enter the earth. Even for the development of the empires, there would be countless benefits. Finally, Miracle City is sincerely recruiting outstanding scholars from various countries to participate in the Yun sect's research. In the future, we can establish Yun sect branches all over the continent, allowing the talents of the continent to participate in source energy technology research. How was Miracle City here to negotiate? This was simply giving benefits to the large countries. The large characters didn't even have time to speak before Meng Qingguo threw a large pile of benefits at them until they couldn't tell north from south. Chapter 609. Miracle City's determination and sincerity were impeccable. The emperors had nothing to say about this. These emperor-level characters, although they were very strong, it was still difficult for them to destroy the alliance. After all, these empire-level powers were too far away from Miracle City, and with the Big Dry Empire as an example, they wouldn't easily become enemies with Miracle City. Why would they give up on such a large benefit? Why would they take the risk of going against Miracle City? Miracle City didn't need to worry about not being able to find a partner. Even if all the empire-level powers of the continent gathered to deal with them, Miracle City would just move to outer space or the underground world. What could these empire-level powers do to them? There were many benefits to the Miracle Summit, and once it was implemented in the future, it would be enough to increase the country's strength. Only the Big Dry Empire would be kicked out, and the Big Dry Emperor's intestines would turn green with regret at that time. No one wanted to follow in their footsteps. Meng Qinggu introduced Miracle Commerce's technology in detail, allowing the emperors to have a deeper understanding of Miracle City's situation. Then they discussed the specific cooperation plan. First, popularizing the spiritual network was Miracle City's most important task. Miracle City would quickly reach this goal, so Miracle City would provide the spiritual helmet's design and manufacturing method to the empire-level powers for free. Each empire would build a production base for the spiritual helmets. Miracle City would also provide an intelligent factory to invest in. In other words, from the helmet itself to the manufacturing process, Miracle City would be in charge of all the technology. The empires would provide resources and manpower, so they could just lie down and make money. Who would reject this kind of business that wouldn't lose money? The spiritual helmet's production cost was very low, so it was suitable for a large-scale promotion. The empire-level powers didn't have a small population. Even if the Dragon Territory didn't have a large population, the subordinate kingdoms and powers had a large population, so this was a market worth at least several billion source stones. No one had any objections. The most important matter had been decided. Meng Qinggu represented Miracle Commerce to discuss other cooperation with the emperors. This cooperation included the Miracle shopping centers, the construction of spatial logistics, the construction of the transport system, as well as smart brains, source energy weapons, and other important products. Popularizing these things would only be good for everyone and not bad. The emperors did not voice any objections. Finally, at the Miracle Summit, Meng Qinggu reached a preliminary agreement with the various large characters. There were a total of 17 agreements and over 40 projects and fields of cooperation. The success of this Miracle Summit would have a profound influence on the continent, and it would lay an important foundation for Miracle Commerce to spread across the continent. Millions of Alliance members witnessed the entire meeting. Even if they didn't have the chance to come to the Miracle Summit, it was broadcasted to every Alliance city. This time everyone cheered once again. A large breakthrough, this was a large breakthrough. Entrepreneurs from all over the world were sharpening their knives. These empire-level powers were enough to cover more than half of the continent's strength. It was not just a few empires, but hundreds of kingdoms. These were all places that had not experienced any development, and this meant that there was a huge business opportunity. A brand new entrepreneurial storm was about to begin. It's finally over. Chu Tian sat in the main hall of the castle and took off his helmet. Meng Qinggu, Meng Yingying, and Nan Gongyun were all sitting here, and they all took off their helmets. Meng Yingying cheered, "Elder sister is too great. I never thought things would go this smoothly." Nan Gongyun also had an excited look on her face. After all, this was a very important transformation for the company. We're going to do something big and dominate the continent's market. Meng Qinggu, on the other hand, said calmly, "Today, it was because we made sufficient preparations, and the great emperors were all improvised, so they were shocked by our conditions. But I believe that these people who walk at the top of the continent are not so easy to deal with. We only made a good start, the most important thing is how to continue on." At this time, Vivian called Chu Tian. "Big brother Chu Tian, big brother Chu Tian, my royal father, as well as Death Wing, Burst Claw, Thunder's Fury, and City Lord Bo Sha, they are all anxiously waiting to see you, but I've blocked them for now." Do you think you can meet them? Of course. How about this, we'll have a small meeting in Moonshine Town. Vivian let out a long sigh of relief. Meng Yingying asked in a curious voice, what happened? The 5 leaders of the alliance want to see me, their reactions are expected. Chu Tian was not surprised by their reactions at all. We've found even more powerful partners, so Miracle City's dependence on them has greatly decreased. Their importance to Miracle City has suddenly decreased, so their hearts are definitely lacking. We need to appease them at this time. Meng Qinggu nodded in agreement. We have just started cooperating with the Empire-level powers and the entire plan is still in the air, so internal stability is very important at this time. I'll contact Qin Bingyu and have her come over. We'll have an internal alliance summit. Miracle City's alliance was divided into the Kingdom Alliance, the Forest Alliance, and the West Sea Alliance. These 3 alliances had a total of 6 leaders. They were the Great Zhou Queen Chen Bingyu, the 4 giants of the Forest of Chaos, and West Sea City Lord Bo Sha. The 6 of them had their own strengths, but their statuses were basically the same. Chu Tian chose Moonshine Town next to Miracle City as the location for the meeting. This small town was specially developed by the Wood Elves to make it easier for them to work and study in Miracle City. Although the town was very small, there were often fashion shows, food festivals, music festivals, and art festivals. Now it was a very popular and unique elven town. Because of the various conditions, Moonshine Town applied for a transport tower from the Alliance and Miracle City approved it. Now that the town had a transport tower, it was very convenient to travel. The 6 leaders of the Alliance had all arrived. Other than Qin Bingyu's calm expression, the others were a bit anxious. I'm truly sorry, I came a bit late. I didn't think everyone would arrive this quickly. Chu Tian walked over with a laugh. I think everyone came to the Miracle Summit today. I wonder if you have any opinions on Miracle City's future strategy. Don't beat around the bush. Burst Claw couldn't keep his cool. The current situation is very complicated. We haven't even finished digesting our internal resources and we've suddenly pulled in most of the continent's powers. What should we do in the future? You have to give me a direction. Thunder's Fury said in a voice filled with agreement, once Miracle City unites with the empires, there will be no power on the continent that can shake us. What should we do in this change? The 5 alliance leaders all spoke one after another. Qin Bingyu just drank her tea. Chu Tian raised his hand and said, everyone, don't be anxious. Although Miracle City is cooperating with the empires, our roots will always be in the Forest of Chaos. Whether the alliance prospers or not, whether the alliance is strong or not, this will directly affect Miracle City's confidence. If we don't have enough strength, how can we hope to cooperate with these large powers? So no matter what stage Miracle Commerce develops to, the Forest of Chaos and the alliance will always be our top priority. His words weren't wrong. The leaders were still not assured. Deathwing said with knit brows, you've given the spiritual helmet and the spiritual space manufacturing method to the various countries for free, we won't have any competitive advantage in this area in the future. This was what the Elven King felt very uncomfortable about. Chu Tian had given the spiritual helmet's blueprint and even the spiritual space manufacturing method to others for free. After these empire powers obtained this technology, would they still cooperate with the Alliance and Miracle City? Wouldn't they earn more by opening their own furnace? So you're worried about this? I can only say that you're worrying too much. When have you ever seen me suffer a loss? Chu Tian shook his head and said, relax, even if they know the spiritual space manufacturing method, they can't create a virtual world like the Miracle Continent. Why? A long-lasting and stable spiritual world is definitely not something that can be casually created. Chu Tian simply explained, even if it is a spiritual world, it needs a stable set of laws to operate, otherwise the entire space will collapse in the blink of an eye. I am indeed prepared to spread the spiritual world manufacturing method, but just the manufacturing method isn't enough. So it was like this. Other than that, the spiritual world needs to be maintained and managed. The miracle continent uses over 100 super smart brains, but it can barely keep the world running. Chu Tian continued to say. The miracle continent will have more and more people in the future, and the demand for super smart brains will increase. Several hundred, several thousand, over 10,000, it's all possible. Just this point alone is enough to make all the people on the continent who want to copy miracle commerce cry themselves to sleep in the toilet. So it was like this. The two barriers Chu Tian pointed out were the most basic technology barriers. But other than these, there were many other restrictions. Therefore, it was impossible for the various countries to create their own spiritual network system for at least 50 years. If the people of the continent wanted to enter the spiritual network, they could only enter the miracle commerce platform. Burst Claw then said, even like this, the spiritual helmet is a large source of income. If you give them the manufacturing method, wouldn't that be giving away billions of source stones for free? The others all nodded. If the spiritual helmet was given to them, just how large of an income would it be? It's wrong for you to think like this. Chu Tian said with a smile, I want to popularize the spiritual network as soon as possible, so we can only use this method. The spiritual helmet might have a large source of income, but don't forget that the profit from the hardware is usually done in one go. What we can really earn is not the hardware, but the giant platform of the virtual space. Chapter 610. Chu Tian clapped his hands. Meng Yingying came over holding a large pile of boxes. These boxes had the symbol of the spiritual helmet on them. It's better to see it with your own eyes than to talk about it. Chu Tian opened a box and took out a beautifully crafted helmet. This is the official version of the miracle helmet. Our miracle city has stockpiled several 100,000 of them, and we are prepared to auction them off to various parts of the continent after the summit. Everyone can try out its functions first. Miracle City had never released an official spiritual helmet before. The emperors participating in the summit today also used a simplified version, so they could only enter the main hall and couldn't go anywhere else. Alright, we'll all put on the helmet. Chu Tian first put on the helmet. Now I'll introduce you all to the functions of the miracle helmet. The Elven King put on the helmet and a weak spiritual fluctuation was sent to his brain, just like a tiny electric shock. The Elven King did not resist. This was the effect of the miracle helmet. His eyes blurred. Lancelot was surprised to find that there was a control panel in his field of vision. Of course, this wasn't real, it was just spiritual energy acting on his brain and creating a projection on his retina, therefore it was just an illusion. I think everyone can see it. Chu Tian sat on the side and explained, in front of you, there are several options. Other than the main option of entering the miracle continent, there is also the spiritual communication, the spiritual bank, and the spiritual shopping center. Currently there are 3 open support services. The miracle continent hasn't been open to the public yet, so there is no way to enter it right now. The main point is these 3 support services. Our cell phone number can be directly linked to the spiritual helmet, and we can use the spiritual helmet to call the number, immediately opening the spiritual communication mode. Do you want to try it? Lancelot and Nidhogg both tried it. After the two of them used the spiritual helmet to communicate, a scene that made their expressions change appeared. When the communication was successfully connected, the image of the other side appeared in front of them. Of course, this image wasn't real, it was just a projection created by the spiritual helmet. Surprised? This is the advantage of the spiritual communication. Chu Tian said with a faint smile, the spiritual communication has 2 advantages compared to the magnetic sound communication. The first is that it ignores distance, so you don't need to worry about running to a place the communication field can't reach. The second point is to be able to produce a mental projection of the other party, thereby achieving face-to-face communication. Lancelot nodded, this is indeed a big improvement. You have to understand that our conventional communication methods have their advantages, but there is a big problem, and that is that we have to build communication stations all over the world. It is very inconvenient to manage, and it consumes a lot of manpower and resources. Moreover, The coverage area is very limited, and it is very troublesome to collect fees and make a profit. When Chu Tian said this, he gently tapped his helmet. The advantage of the spiritual communication is that we don't need to build base stations all over the world. With several hundred smart brains managing the spiritual communication terminals, Miracle City can establish a very good pricing model. Miracle City would use two communication methods to monopolize the entire continent's communication market. Mental communication was expensive, and it was mainly targeted at high-end people. The magnetic sound communication of ordinary mobile phones was very cheap and targeted at the middle and lower classes. Chu Tian could confidently say that as long as the spiritual helmet could be promoted in the mainland, the communication market alone would be able to make up for all the lost money from selling the helmet. Most importantly, the telecommunications market was a consumption-type market. It would become an endless source of income. The Dragon Lord couldn't help asking, how will Miracle City pay the fees? Good question. Chu Tian gently snapped his fingers. Do you see the personal bank option under the communication option? They all placed their attention on the spiritual bank. An account information box appeared in front of them. Lancelot and the others were surprised to find that it directly displayed the bank's information, including how many cards they had and how much they had. Chu Tian explained, our alliance's banks have already used the most advanced spiritual identification technology. Each person's spiritual energy is unique in this world, therefore it is very safe to use it as a personal bank key. I have already collected the bank information through the smart brain and stored it in the spiritual network world. Our goal is to let each person have their own spiritual account in the future. This discovery was truly shocking. They found that not only could they see the spiritual account, they could also use it to transfer money. The cost of the spiritual communication was also directly deducted from the account. The others also noticed that on the Phantom Control panel, the last option was the spiritual shopping center. Opening the shopping center. As expected. It really was connected to the Miracle Shopping Center. Chu Tian explained to them, this shopping center is our official shopping center, the online version of the Miracle Shopping Center. For all kinds of materials, there are over several hundred subdivisions, allowing customers to buy any product from the Miracle Shopping Center. In the future, there will be over 1 billion users. The small online spiritual shopping center combined with the spiritual payment system will become a cornucopia. Our entire Forest Alliance will benefit from this. Lancelot and the others couldn't help admiring Chu Tian for being a genius. He actually thought of opening the spiritual bank and the spiritual shopping center. If the people on the continent wanted to buy something, wouldn't they be able to put on a helmet and choose from over 1 million products? Each product could be viewed through a virtual image, and as long as they had money in their bank account, they could directly pay for it. The Miracle Commerce wouldn't just benefit from this. The 5 large banks of the Alliance would advance by leaps and bounds. The giants of the Forest Alliance had cooperated with the Miracle Shopping Center a long time ago, and there were quite a few entrepreneurs that had established quite a large business there. In the future, the Miracle Shopping Center would move to the Miracle Spiritual Helmet. Then the giants of the forest would have a head start advantage. Chu Tian promised on the spot that the Miracle Spiritual Helmet would be bound to the 6 large banks. They were the Elven Bank, Behemoth Bank, Giant Bank, Titan Bank, Deep Blue Bank, and the Central Bank, Miracle Bank. After the Miracle Spiritual Helmet was popularized, the 6 large banks would dominate the continent's economy. Just based on this point, the 5 giants wouldn't need to worry about being eliminated by the times. Who told them to hold the wallet of this era? These are just the subsidiary services of the Miracle Spiritual Helmet. Our Miracle Continent is the true leader. The Miracle Continent will create a spiritual network that connects the entire world. With this kind of large group social background, we can sell virtual cities and virtual products, provide virtual entertainment, and provide virtual services. Any one of these has limitless potential. Chu Tian took off the helmet. As members of the Alliance, you will naturally receive more help and support on the Miracle Continent in the future. Do you still think that making the helmet public and letting them earn money is a loss? Chapter 611. Now they completely understood Chu Tian's thoughts. The miracle spiritual helmet itself was not important. Chu Tian just wanted to quickly occupy the market and make the miracle spiritual helmet an indispensable part of people's lives. In the next 10 to 20 years. Even if there was a power that could imitate the miracle helmets and produce their own brand of helmets, it would be hard to replace the miracle helmets that had already formed a certain scale in the market. Chu Tian had already explained everything. I'll be leaving first. Lancelot called out to him, please wait, there's still something else. Chu Tian looked at him and asked in a curious voice, what is it? Is there any confusion regarding the summit? The city lord has already explained it clearly, of course it's not for this matter. Lancelot said with a faint smile, it's the Night Elven King who asked me to send a message. He wants to see you alone. Night Elven King. The Night Elven King's identity was not normal. This fellow was the ruler of the Dark Night Forest, a fully deserving emperor-level character. Although among the elves, the Night Elven King Eunice and the Wood Elven King Lancelot were on the same level, in terms of power, the Night Elven King was several times stronger than the Wood Elven King. Whether it was in terms of individual strength or influence. The Night Elven King wanted to see Chu Tian. How could Chu Tian refuse to see him? Several elves dressed as night elves were sent to Moonshine Town. The elf in the lead looked to be around 30-40 years old, but the aura he gave off was very old, like an old man that had lived for 1 to 2,000 years. Actually the Night Elven King Eunice's age wasn't that different from this. Lancelot personally came forward to greet him, Your Excellency Eunice, City Lord Chu Tian is inside, please. Eunice looked at Lancelot with a look of appreciation. The Wood Elves were the strongest elven race on the continent, but they had been declining for tens of thousands of years. Now they could only stay safe in the Forest of Chaos. But this generation's Wood Elven King was unprecedentedly outstanding. It wasn't simple for him to have such achievements at such a young age. The most important thing was, this young Elven King seized this opportunity. In the future, the Wood Elves would be Miracle City's main partner in the Forest of Chaos. If they rose with Miracle City, perhaps they could return to their peak and even surpass history. Eunice came in front of Chu Tian, greeting City Lord. Your Majesty, the Elven King is this polite, this little one cannot accept it. Chu Tian's mouth said this, but he didn't look like he couldn't bear it. He was clearly very happy. Your Majesty has come to find this little one, I wonder what advice you have. City Lord is a genius, this one does not dare give any advice, but I have a request, Eunice had a sincere expression. The elves all had a kind of gentle temperament, which was probably related to the beliefs and habits of their race. This was also why Eunice clearly had the influence and strength to be an emperor, but he still considered himself a trivial king. The Dark Night Elves believe in the moon god and it's said that Miracle City has already built ruins on the moon. According to the ancient records, the ruins on the moon were created by the moon god and there is a moon god palace inside, waiting for the moon god's descendants to open it. Chu god was a slightly stunned, chu. Eunice took out a jade plate. The jade plate was engraved with a large number of profound runes. That's right, the token to open the Moon God Palace is actually a sacred tool passed down from generation to generation in our Dark Night Elven clan. Eunice. Tian chu, to him Chu Tian Chen. Is. Chu, that's right. Eunice revealed a look of excitement, the Moon God's temple is very important to my clan, I hope the City Lord can help us. Chu Tian rubbed his chin in thought. Sending them to the moon wasn't hard at all. Chu Tian could casually open a transport array and go up in a few minutes. The problem now was that if the Dark Night Elves occupied the moon, wouldn't they be a hindrance to Miracle City's development? Other than that, Chu Tian was also very interested in the moon's ruins. He didn't plan on giving it to others to develop. Eunice saw Chu Tian's hesitation and immediately added, if the City Lord agrees to this matter, the Dark Night Elves will forever support Miracle City and become Miracle City's firm allies. This was not a bad condition. Miracle City lacked peak-level allies on the continent. The Dark Night Forest's influence was enough to fight an empire. If they could obtain the support of the Dark Night Forest, Miracle City wouldn't have to be so careful in the future. Chu Tian said to Eunice, I can send you to the moon and I can give the moon god's temple to you, but I have a condition. During the exploration of the moon god's temple, I want to bring my people with you. Eunice understood what Chu Tian was thinking. This was nothing more than trying to gain some benefits from inside. But since Chu Tian agreed to give the moon god's temple to the Dark Night Elves, how could Eunice not be satisfied? As for the benefits inside, the Dark Night Forest was an empire-level power with tens of thousands of years of history, so they didn't place it in their eyes. Eunice was very happy. First I thank the city lord. Chu Tian nodded. Yingying, bring the Dark Night Elven Majesty and use the transport tower to go to the moon's base. Have the Dark Night Elven friends search for the entrance to the moon god's temple. Eunice never thought that Chu Tian would be this straightforward, actually directly sending them up. He couldn't help feeling grateful to Chu Tian. Chu Tian secretly rolled his eyes. Father has searched for this long and still hasn't found a way to enter the center of the moon, otherwise who would need you? After sending off Eunice, Chu Tian returned to Miracle City. The several rulers had finished participating in the Miracle Summit and were now preparing to return to their territories. Chu Tian learned some details from Meng Qingguo. These empire-level powers were secretly trying to rope in the surrounding powers of Miracle City. There was no need to mention the Dark Night Forest, they had a close relationship with the Eternal Forest. The other powers were all colluding with each other. For example, the Dragon Territory and the Dragon's Ridge were very close. For example, the Wild Beast Empire and the Savage Highlands were very close. For example, the Netherworld Sea wanted to cooperate with the Giant Mountain Range. For example, Chen Bingyu reported that the Wind Moon Empire was secretly looking for him. For example, the Heaven Burning Empire specially went to West Sea City to ally with Bo Sha. These large characters took advantage of the fact that Chu Tian wasn't paying attention to spend a lot of money in the Forest of Chaos, wantonly buying cities that hadn't joined the Forest Alliance yet. This was because they knew that if they joined the Forest Alliance, the cities would be monitored by smart brains and they wouldn't be able to do anything. So, they thought of ways to pick cities that hadn't joined and then take these cities to join, increasing their position in the alliance. How could these painstaking actions be hidden from the young Miss eyes? But regarding these actions, Chu Tian turned a blind eye, too lazy to say anything. The 6 giants were all smart people, they knew their limits. As long as it didn't harm the alliance, it didn't matter if they took some benefits from each other. Chu Tian didn't care about these messy matters. This was because there was an important matter waiting for Chu Tian to complete, which was to prepare for his wedding with Meng Yingying. Chu Tian didn't feel assured finding anyone to do this matter, so he had to personally arrange it and let the young miss be his assistant. According to the agreement, this wedding would be held in West Sea City, but Chu Tian wanted to give Meng Yingying the most luxurious wedding in history. Of course he couldn't just do it half-heartedly. Chu Tian directly decided that the Miracle Continent's open beta would be held on the same day as Meng Yingying's wedding. Chu Tian didn't just want the Miracle Continent to commemorate this wedding, he also wanted all the large characters from the continent to come and give their blessings to Meng Yingying. Chu Tian said to Meng Qingguo, "How long do we need to prepare? According to your plan, it won't be enough without 3-4 months. What? 3-4 months? Chu Tian shook his head and said, at most a month, no more. You don't want Meng Yingying to wait forever, right? The young miss was helpless about this. All right. Then 1 month it is. Chapter 6:12. Before Chu Tian finished his business, news came from the moon base. Eunice and the Dark Night Elven Elders had found the moon god's palace, which made Chu Tian very surprised. But since they had found it, how could there be a reason to ignore it? Chu Tian directly brought the 4 giants of the Forest Alliance and City Lord Bo Sha, the 5 strongest Heaven Domain experts of the Alliance, to the moon base. Chu Tian had just arrived at the moon base when the little fox excitedly came over, climbing onto Chu Tian's shoulder in 2 or 3 steps. He hadn't brought the little fox with him these days, so the little fox spent most of its time on the moon base. On one hand, it could protect the moon base from being destroyed, while on the other hand, the little fox was swallowing the moon monsters, allowing its strength to increase by leaps and bounds. The little fox's body was a size bigger and its 5 tails had completely grown. Now even the 6th tail had begun to appear. This was enough to prove the little fox's progress on the moon. According to the report from the moon base, within several hundred kilometers of the base, there wasn't a single shadow of a moon monster to be found. This fellow really could eat. It was no wonder Chu Tian couldn't find a way to enter the moon god's palace. The moon god's palace was in the center of the moon's energy ocean, and because of the powerful seals and restrictions, as well as the 1,000-meter deep energy ocean, all of Chu Tian's probing methods were useless. Chu Tian looked over the energy ocean and tried to use his divine sense to explore, but as soon as his divine sense entered, it was immediately blocked by an even stronger resistance. The energy inside is too strong, it won't be easy for us to enter. Not to mention that there are seals and restrictions below, we need to think about how to open the moon god's palace. Eunice said, City Lord doesn't need to worry, the Dark Night Elves have already made preparations. Chu Tian was a bit stunned. Oh. Is that so? The 4 Dark Elf elders stood at the 4 corners. Eunice took out the jade plate from his bosom and threw it out. This moon god's token spun and floated above the sea of energy. The 4 Dark Elves started chanting incantations one after another, releasing powerful energy from their bodies into the jade plate. A pillar of light fell onto the surface of the ocean. It was like a frozen river falling on the surface of the water. The entire surface of the sea was stirred up by the violent energy, and then at a speed visible to the naked eye, it continuously froze from the center to the surroundings. When it was completely frozen, Chu Tian was shocked. It had actually turned into a large chain of palaces. That's right, the originally liquid energy ocean, upon being bombarded by the power, violently surged, and then solidified in the air, turning into palaces. Each of the palaces looked crystal clear, like exquisite and beautiful jade carvings. Every detail was perfect. They did not look like they had been formed in an instant. Instead, they looked like they had been slowly carved out of a huge piece of jade over hundreds of years. There was not a single flaw or mistake. Chu Tian rubbed his chin. This is getting interesting. Eunice said to Chu Tian, Master of the city, let's go down. The group arrived at the central palace. The interior of the main palace was just as intricate. Every item was lifelike and presented in the form of jade carvings. Whether it was the furnishings or the decorations of the palace pillars, they were all integrated with the entire palace. There was an ancient aura everywhere. This palace was the moon god's palace. The Dark Night Elves could send their most outstanding people to the moon god's palace to cultivate and comprehend. This palace was filled with the moon god's aura, allowing them to cultivate twice as fast with half the effort. What Eunice really wanted was not as simple as a cultivation holy land. What he wanted was the moon god's ancient inheritance. In the moon god's palace's main altar, there was a passage to the moon's core. The place where the moon god fell was one of the most important treasures of this world. Chu Tian had long wanted to dig it out, but he didn't have a way. With the help of the Dark Night Elves Eunice and the others, this matter became much simpler. This is the moon god's ruins. Everyone followed the secret path of the sacrificial altar and arrived at the deeper region of the moon. As soon as they entered, everyone's body trembled. This was because this was an incomparably huge and spacious space. It was filled with unbelievable spiritual energy, and the ground was filled with precious crystals that had been condensed for hundreds of thousands of years. All kinds of precious herbs that grew in this environment were almost all immortal grade. This many immortal herbs. Most of them were level 4 immortal herbs. This was an unimaginable temptation to heaven domain experts. Whether it was the Elven King, the Dragon Lord, Thunder's Fury, Burst Claw, or Bo Sha, these heaven domain experts that weren't weak had never seen such an enticing scene before. If they brought back a few of the herbs here, they would be good things that heaven domain experts would fight over. These herbs grew in this kind of environment. They already had a divine nature. The night elves were also very excited and overjoyed. However, compared to the various immortal medicines in front of them, they were even more excited about the huge white pillars standing in this space. At first glance, they thought they were naturally formed crystal pillars, but they were actually formed from God's bones. Not only were these top-quality materials, they were also the most important inheritance. There were divine runes on the surface of each giant pillar, which were actually ancient cultivation techniques and secret techniques. They were the most important treasures left behind by the moon god's descendants. What are you standing there for? Chu Tian and the little fox couldn't help already. Let's quickly go take a look. Chu Tian had just taken a few steps when he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. There was a beam of energy coming from the moon god's ruins and Chu Tian was shocked. He quickly jumped through space and instantly went back. What is this damn thing? Everyone felt the ground tremble. 6 giants covered in divine light came out of the moon god's ruins. Each giant was over 10 meters tall and it was impossible to see their faces, but from the powerful energy fluctuations they released, they weren't fellows that were easy to deal with. Eunice knit his brows. These are the divine guards left behind by the moon god's ruins to protect the moon god's ruins from being stolen by outsiders. These giants are all above the 7th heaven domain layer. 7th heaven domain layer? They were already peak experts on this continent. The most terrifying thing was that these giants were formed from the moon god's divine sense, so they were immortal in this space. Even if they suffered any damage, they could instantly recover. It was impossible to estimate their numbers, but it wouldn't be small. With these fellows guarding this place, who could take the treasures? What are you waiting for? Quickly stop them. Eunice said in an awkward voice, sorry, the Dark Night Elves only passed down the method to open the ruins. As for how to stop the divine guards, it has already been lost over the years, so even we don't know. Fuck. Why didn't you say this earlier? Chu Tian simply wanted to spit out vulgarities. The 6 giants had already charged in front of them and each one had a powerful aura. The moonlight condensed into a giant sword and spear, attacking them with a shocking might. Chapter 6:13. The moon god guards were very strong, but it was a good thing that other than Chu Tian, the other people here weren't weak, at least they weren't below the moon god guards. The Dark Knight Elven King Eunice was in the peak 9th heaven domain layer and his strength was unimaginable, easily suppressing the moon god guards. But it was only a temporary suppression. The moon god guards couldn't be killed in the moon god's ruins at all. Their self-recovery speed was more than 100 times faster than the normal Moon Clan monsters on the moon's surface. As soon as the battle broke out, it caused a huge commotion, attracting the moon god guards from other areas. In just a short while, the number of moon god guards had increased to more than 10. This was the strength of several 7th heaven domain layer experts. Everyone felt the pressure increase. Eunice never thought that the defenses of the moon god's ruins would be this strong, so he could only helplessly suggest to everyone, the defenses of the moon god's ruins are too strong, we might meet danger if we force our way in. How about we go back and gather more experts before exploring again? The others nodded. Although the moon god's ruins were very attractive, the current situation didn't allow them to temporarily retreat. The moon god's ruins had already met such a large resistance, who knew what dangers they would meet if they went deeper. The moon god's ruins was a powerful ancient god. The defenses of the moon god's ruins couldn't be as simple as a group of guards. If their guesses weren't wrong, the deeper they went, the more terrifying ancient restrictions there would be. If they were chased by the moon god guards, they would need to be on guard against the traps left by the ancient gods. Even with Eunice's strength, they would still fall into a dangerous situation. Eunice and the others all expressed their desire to retreat. Who would have thought that the weakest Chu Tian would disagree at this time? Don't be anxious, I think I have a way. The defenses of the moon god's ruins are actually controlled by the divine sense left behind by the ancient gods. Therefore, as long as we can disperse the divine sense of the ancient gods, the defenses of the moon god's ruins will collapse. Although this is true, how could it be easy? Eunice didn't agree with Chu Tian's risk, not to mention the other traps. Just these divine guards are not something we can deal with. The divine guards had limitless strength and were undying. If there were more than 10 of them, they would still be able to resist, but if there were more of them, it would definitely be difficult to resist. Chu Tian didn't say anything and the little fox made a move. No one could clearly see what happened, but the little fox sent out seals in the air. These seals were like meteors that hit the moon god's guard and a shocking scene appeared. The moon god's guard was pinned down and couldn't move at all. After about 4 or 5 seconds of stalemate, they exploded one by one and countless fragments were gathered by the little fox. A portion of this energy was swallowed by the little fox and the other part gathered around the little fox, making the little fox's body expand by 100 times. It turned into an incomparably large 5-tailed demon fox. The fox let out a low cry and fiercely slammed its large paw on the ground. The spot where the paw landed left a dazzling light. The light rapidly spread in all directions and interweaved into an incomparably enormous formation. The divine guards who could have instantly regenerated were affected by the formation and their regenerating speed was greatly reduced. Everyone was shocked. This fox suppressed the power of God? There's nothing strange about this. Chu Tian had guessed that the little fox could suppress these divine guards, but he never thought that the little fox would do it so beautifully. This fellow's ancestor is the great desolate 9-tailed demonic god, capturing heavenly dragons and undying birds as food. Its strength is not inferior to the moon god's. Although it hasn't matured yet, it can suppress the guards refined from the moon god's remnant consciousness. I think it's more than enough. The Dark Night Elves and the experts of the Alliance never thought this. Chu Tian's pet had such a big background. With the fox's help, perhaps they could succeed. Chu Tian pointed at the several balls of light floating in the air that were gathering energy from all directions. The fox's formation can only slow down the moon god's guards' regeneration, but it can't stop them. We need to leave a few people here to continuously scatter the energy gathered. Eunice said to the 2 elven elders, I ask the 2 of you to stay. The 2 elven elders nodded, yes. Chu Tian gave the little fox a look and the little fox reached out with its claws to grab Chu Tian. It wasn't known if it was intentional, but it actually placed Chu Tian on its shoulder. Normally it was the fox that lay on Chu Tian's shoulder. They never thought that there would be a day when Chu Tian would stand on the fox's shoulder. Everyone, follow me. Chu Tian released his divine sense. They hadn't gone far. There is a restriction in front of us. The method to break it is like this. Chu Tian was the weakest among them and now even the little fox was stronger than him. But Chu Tian's abilities and knowledge were incomparable. When he worked together with the little fox and Eunice and the others, even the restriction in the moon god's ruins couldn't trap him. This group of people passed through more and more restrictions, encountering quite a few moon god's guards along the way. Every time they were attacked by the moon god's guards, the little fox would gather them together and suppress them in one fell swoop. At this time, there would be 1 or 2 people in the group to stop the energy from gathering. As they continued to explore the ruins, there were fewer and fewer people by Chu Tian's side. Finally there was only Chu Tian, Eunice, and Lancelot left. They were already close to the center of the moon god's ruins. Chu Tian found that in the center of the ruins, there was a rainbow-colored crystal that was releasing a strong divine sense fluctuation. The moon god's divine sense. Divine sense was a kind of thing that didn't have a shape or state. It was illusory, but it truly existed. What people never thought was that the moon god's divine sense would condense into a crystal and exist in a solid form. This giant crystal's will was controlling the entire moon god's ruins and the entire moon. Dong, dong, dong. Over 20 moon god's guards appeared from all directions. The fox directly swallowed them all at once and slammed its claws on the ground, using the demonic beast's array to suppress them. "Let me deal with the moon god's will," Chu Tian said to the two elven kings. "I'll leave these annoying guards to you." Eunice was a bit stunned. Although the great moon god has fallen, the ancient god's will is immortal. This tens of thousands of evolutions has already formed an independent consciousness and a new existence. Its strength is something you can't imagine. It's too dangerous for you to do this. Ha, 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 how can there be a harvest without taking risks? Chu Tian charged at the moon god's divine sense crystal. Chu Tian had been in the true spirit realm for a long time. This was a very precious and suitable opportunity to break through. Chapter 6:14. The moon god had already fallen. But for a being as strong as the moon god, its consciousness and soul had already been separated. Even if its soul was completely destroyed, the consciousness attached to its body could still be preserved. After several tens of thousands of years of evolution, it would finally form an independent consciousness. Now the divine sense crystal in front of him. It was this kind of thing. Before Chu Tian even got close, the divine sense crystal could already feel Chu Tian's thoughts. This mortal actually wanted to swallow it. This made the spiritual god's consciousness very angry. Although the consciousness was reflected in the way of thinking and had nothing to do with the moon god of the past, the consciousness still carried part of the moon god's memories, and the high and mighty pride of the moon god still remained. How could he tolerate a mere mortal coveting him? Kill him! Kill him! When Chu Tian was still 100 feet away, he suddenly felt a wave of divine sense surging towards him. This energy was like an endless ocean, instantly covering his body. Like a raging wave hitting the shore, an angry wave soared into the sky. In front of Chu Tian's vision domain divine sense, it was as small as a leaf. "You're just a trivial ancient god's remnant consciousness, what is there to be proud of?" Chu Tian's source spirit soared into the sky and his eyes turned golden, representing his divine sense. In terms of total divine sense, Chu Tian was like a small boat floating in the ocean. The ocean was giant. The boat was small. However, no matter how strong the ocean was, the boat still moved forward and was not swallowed. Although it was inferior in terms of quantity, its quality far surpassed it. Chu Tian's technique was something this consciousness could not grasp. No matter how strong the consciousness released, Chu Tian could always skillfully dodge and dissolve it. 100 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. The ocean in front of Chu Tian was becoming more and more turbulent and he could feel the resistance becoming stronger. This kind of battle could not be seen with the naked eye and there was no damage to the surrounding environment, but this battle was more dangerous than any attack. Once Chu Tian's divine sense boat was submerged in the consciousness's divine sense sea, Chu Tian's divine sense would be instantly shattered. If it was light, his divine sense would be destroyed and he would never be able to use his divine sense again. Moreover, his soul would be damaged and he would die on the spot. He would even be controlled by the consciousness and become a puppet of the other side. Very risky. Chu Tian was very clear on what he was doing, but compared to the large benefits, he felt that this risk was worth it. This little bit of ability can't stop me. Chu Tian's eyes released a golden glow and the entire nine-eyed demon god source spirit seemed to be covered in a golden glow. The divine sense boat also released a dazzling golden glow and its power increased by several times. It was like a sharp sword breaking through the waves as it pierced through the sea. Finally he arrived in front of the divine sense crystal. Chu Tian felt that his divine sense was being consumed very quickly, but at the same time, Chu Tian was clearly aware that the real battle had just begun. His body suddenly ignited and blue and white flames continued to pour out, instantly covering his surroundings. At the same time, the divine sense crystal was being refined by it. Like this, Chu Tian was directly in contact with the consciousness. Chu Tian felt like his brain was being smashed by a siege hammer. The entire world seemed to shatter as he was sucked into the divine sense sea. Chu Tian stood on a small golden boat and was surrounded by the silver ocean. The silver ocean waves slammed against the golden boat. Although the golden boat looked very ordinary, no matter how the waves crashed against it, it was still intact and continued to float on the endless silver ocean. At this time, the silver ocean began to change. An incomparably large whirlpool appeared in the center of the silver ocean. From nothing, from small to large, it covered most of the ocean in a short period of time. A strong suction force tried to tear the golden boat to pieces. Chu Tian did not panic and nimbly controlled the small boat to hover around the edge of the whirlpool. No matter how strong the whirlpool was, it could not suck the small boat in. But during this process, the silver ocean quickly shrank. The silver ocean water was gathered in one place by the whirlpool and was finally compressed to a high density. The entire ocean dried up, but where the ocean disappeared, a silver giant slowly stood up. The giant was not too tall. It was around 15 meters tall. This giant, which was only 15 meters tall, was formed by absorbing the energy of the entire sea of consciousness. Its body emitted a silver metallic light, and every inch of its body seemed to be filled with invincible power. Its entire body was covered in a dazzling light, as if the ancient moon god in the legends had been resurrected. Oh, damn it! Chu Tian had never thought that the consciousness form would have such a trick up its sleeve. The main reason why it was unable to destroy Chu Tian's divine sense was that the consciousness form's power was too scattered. It didn't know how to concentrate all of its energy, so even though it had a great momentum, it was just a facade. But now, the situation was completely different. The consciousness body's power was condensed in an unbelievable way. The silver giant raised his hands high up, and an incomparably huge silver sword was taking shape bit by bit. The sword was completely made of light, and it was engraved with runes that could destroy divine sense. The silver giant held the sword with both hands, and furiously chopped down. The silver sword light could illuminate heaven and earth. It was like a 10,000-meter wave was released. Chu Tian's expression immediately became ugly. This attack could not be avoided. The golden boat began to change and instantly turned into a golden shield in front of him. The silver wave-like sword light heavily hit the golden shield, causing it to cave in and a part of it to completely shatter. No way. The power of the two was not on the same level. Chu Tian felt that his divine sense had been heavily damaged. For the consciousness body, this attack just now was just a casual attack. This consciousness body's endurance was far stronger than Chu Tian had imagined, so it was impossible to win in a head-on clash. The silver giant raised its sword again. A storm gathered on the blade. Chu Tian knew that if the next sword was used, its power would probably be twice as strong as before. Chu Tian's divine sense shield would be completely torn to pieces. There was basically no way to avoid it. If he lost the protection of the divine sense shield, Chu Tian's consciousness would definitely be destroyed by the moonlight sword. He could only risk it. While the silver giant was preparing the storm, Chu Tian also began to move. The golden divine sense shield automatically dissolved and turned into a golden spear. Chu Tian held the spear in one hand and a large amount of runes began to spread out from where Chu Tian was holding it. Chu Tian had used all the divine sense destroying secret techniques, and source spirit's power he could think of to support this divine sense spear. Chi! The surface of the golden spear was covered in golden flames. This fire was no ordinary fire, it was the source fire of Chu Tian's divine sense. Chu Tian had poured all of his divine sense's power into this attack without holding anything back. This meant that whether or not this attack succeeded, Chu Tian's divine sense would be greatly reduced. The silver giant's storm had just finished brewing. An incomparably large treasure sword was about to be raised. Chu Tian knew that if he didn't make a move now, it would be too late. He did not leave any divine sense to defend, he poured all of his strength into this spear. The moment it fell, the golden spear slammed into the silver giant's chest and the golden light collided with the silver light. The silver giant was pushed back and a pained and angry roar came from its body. Hong! An explosive sound rang out. The golden divine sense spear pierced through the silver giant's chest and came out from its back. The silver giant's spine seemed to have been pulled out and it fell to the ground like a mountain of gold and jade. Chu Tian revealed a look of joy. Did he kill it? If he could kill this fellow in a single move, it would not be a waste of his divine sense. As long as the moon god's consciousness was killed, no matter how much divine sense Chu Tian lost, he could make up for it. This thought had just appeared. Chu Tian was pulled back to reality. The silver giant's body twitched a few times before it slowly crawled up from the ground. Although there was a meter-wide hole in its chest and there were golden flames burning inside, it seemed like it wasn't affected at all. It was like it had accidentally tripped and crawled back up. The golden flames in the hole slowly disappeared. The silver light that flowed through the hole once again solidified. The silver giant's body recovered at an unbelievable speed. In other words, Chu Tian's full-strength attack did not even cause the slightest bit of damage to the silver giant. At this time, the silver hands began to condense the treasure sword again and a storm of energy appeared on the treasure sword. This is bad. When Chu Tian quickly dodged, the silver wave passed by and his consciousness was almost destroyed. However, he couldn't dodge it a second time. This kind of attack was not worth mentioning to the silver giant at all. What should he do? Chu Tian found himself in a very bad situation. Although he had 9 different powers, in the divine sense space, he could only use the consciousness to resist the divine sense, he could not use the other powers at all. Chu Tian had already used up all his divine sense in that attack. Facing the silver giant's attack, he did not even have a chance to block it. No. He would die without a doubt. Chu Tian thought of something. Other than the 9 powers of the 9-eyed demon god, didn't Father also have a power that he had never used before? This was the power that the other ancient god had planted in him in the central state tower. It was this ancient power that allowed the 9-eyed demon god to have another eye. The 9-eyed demon god's eye represented a corresponding power. The 10th eye meant a 10th power. But it was a pity that the eye had appeared a long time ago, but it had never opened. Chapter 6:15. The silver giant raised the giant sword of light high up and a dazzling light was released, covering the entire space like a surging sea. Chu Tian wanted to dodge, but he didn't have time to move. The energy released by the giant sword turned into a strong pressure. Peng, peng, peng. It was like 100 giant mountains falling down. Chu Tian was firmly suppressed in place. He felt that he couldn't even move his pinky finger. The vast energy within the silver giant's body gathered into its arms, gathered into the sword, and finally condensed into a dazzling silver river. When the blade of light streaked across, the entire space was torn apart by the dazzling silver light, completely splitting the sky in half. This was no longer a normal attack. This was the full-strength attack of the silver giant's consciousness. This consciousness was born from the moon god's divine sense and now it could completely control the moon god's divine sense. It could freely use the divine sense of the ancient spiritual god and not mentioning other aspects, at least in terms of divine sense, this fellow's strength was close to a demigod's. A demigod's attack, how could he block it? Although the ancient spiritual god had warned Chu Tian that he couldn't casually open the 10th eye, otherwise it would bring him irreversible consequences. Did Chu Tian still have a choice now? The consciousness formed from the moon god's divine sense far surpassed his imagination. Even if the divine sense wasn't exhausted, with Chu Tian's trivial vision domain divine sense, he would still die under this kind of strong attack without any suspense. Although the risk was large. But he had to endure it. Since you want to go all out, then I'll go all out with you. Chu Tian's consciousness slowly entered his source spirit. The 10th eye's power was sealed, so Chu Tian had to take the initiative to enter the depths of his source spirit to open it. The entire divine sense world disappeared. A completely new space appeared around him. This was an incomparably huge divine palace complex. Each divine palace stood proudly on the ground, and each divine palace had a different color and style. The green divine palace was brimming with life energy, the black divine palace was enveloped with a black hole-like gravitational force, the white divine palace was shaking with spatial ripples, the silver divine palace was flowing with traces of time, the purple divine palace was filled with the aura of souls, and the red divine palace was filled with violent power. Of course, this was not a real world. Each temple was a manifestation of a source spirit. There were 10 temples in Chu Tian's source spirit world, each representing the 10 kinds of powers that Chu Tian had. The doors of 9 temples were open, releasing a vast sea of energy. There was a special temple that was an exception. Although the 9 divine halls were different from each other, they were connected to one another. This divine hall, however, existed independently. It was obviously smaller, and the door was tightly sealed by a rusty chain. The power of the 10th eye. Break it, release it. A pitch-black sword with blue and white flames coiled around it appeared in Chu Tian's hand. He hurriedly released a dazzling sword light and hacked on the rusted iron chain. The destructive power that gushed out from the sword could only create a small crack on the iron chain. On the contrary, the sword blade was nearly knocked out of his hand. Damn it! This seemingly fragile chain was actually so difficult to deal with. Chu Tian knew that he was in danger, so he didn't have time to think about it. Chu Tian raised the burning black sword high into the air and the 9 divine halls behind him began to tremble. Each divine hall released a strand of demonic and divine power. The 9 strands of demonic and divine power revolved above his head, like 9 vicious dragons. In the end, they all poured into the black sword. Break! Chu Tian gathered the 9-eyed demon god's energy and slashed at the sealing chain. The chain finally broke into several pieces, but there was a powerful backlash that came from within. Chu Tian was pushed back several dozen meters and the 9 temples began to tremble. If it wasn't for the fact that Chu Tian's source spirit was strong, just this backlash would have caused a normal god-level source spirit to collapse. Open for me. Chu Tian knew that since he had already done it, there was no reason for him to regret it. Chu Tian quickly charged in front of the temple and his hands pressed against the thick and heavy palace door. A deep roar came from his mouth and a crack appeared in front of him. It was just a crack, but the energy that came from inside was like thousands of steel needles that fell onto Chu Tian's body. Too terrifying. Too strong. Chu Tian was sent flying back 100 meters. It was like an earthquake had occurred in the entire source spirit world. Hundreds and thousands of cracks appeared in the ground, covering the entire source spirit world. Chu Tian felt his soul being severely shaken. This bit of power that leaked out was enough to scatter his soul. The 9 temples released light at the same time. In the end, it was barely able to stop the cracks from spreading, finally preventing his source spirit from collapsing. Chu Tian's little life was barely saved, but his soul was heavily injured. It would be a hidden danger in his future cultivation and battles. This was the price he had to pay to forcefully open the 10th door. Even if he had to pay such a heavy price. Chu Tian had only opened a crack in the door. Chu Tian left the source spirit world and returned to the divine sense world. The process of opening the door seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it only lasted for a short moment. The silver giant had just swept the giant sword in front of him, and what it held in its hand was no longer a sword, but a majestic galaxy. This was an earth-shattering divine sense slash. Perhaps even an emperor-level character would find it hard to block it. When Chu Tian was about to turn to ashes, one of the eyes in the middle of the 9-eyed demon god source spirit that had always been closed suddenly opened a crack. Chu Tian's eyes seemed to disappear, leaving behind a transparent color. This kind of emptiness was not empty, rather this kind of emptiness was everything, encompassing the heaven and earth, seeing through all beings. This giant sword releasing a silver glow stopped in front of Chu Tian. This majestic silver river seemed like it had been frozen. Although the silver river was still majestic, it no longer had the ability to flow. The invisible energy wrapped around the silver sword, as if it had been torn apart by countless hands, or as if a river had been dried up by the blazing sun. This attack, which could destroy any spiritual sense on the continent, had been turned into nothingness on the spot in an unimaginable way. The silver giant's body trembled. This was the fear that came from the consciousness. Although the consciousness had never seen this kind of power before, from the moon god's remnant memories, even a real moon god would feel fear when facing this kind of power. Not to mention this independent will that came from the moon god's divine sense. This power surpassed the elements, surpassed the material, surpassed the spirit, surpassed the soul, and surpassed time and space. It was above all beings, surpassing everything in the world, but it ruled over all beings, controlling time and everything. This was a power that surpassed everything. Even a powerful spiritual god could not resist it. This energy did not have an accurate description. People called it fate. Chapter 6:16. The power of fate had no attributes, no physical body, no rules, and was very difficult to detect. This theory sounded very mysterious, but it actually existed. Not only did it exist, but it was also everywhere. Everything in the world. Everything in the world, whether it was living or inanimate, whether it was a powerful deity or a tiny speck of dust, it was fate that caused everything to change. Fate was the only power that couldn't be understood or resisted. Some people thought that they could overcome fate, but it was actually just a form of self-consolation, and even this self-consolation was the result of fate itself. No matter how powerful one was, no matter how high one's cultivation was, fate was something that couldn't be broken. Chu Tian released his power of fate. Of course, Chu Tian's power of fate was very weak. The power of fate that flowed in this world was like an ocean, while the power of fate that Chu Tian currently possessed was like a grain of sand in that ocean. Although Chu Tian's power of fate was very weak, it was more than enough to change the fate of one or two people. This attack. Chu Tian's soul should have been destroyed. In a situation where Chu Tian had no way to resist, he released his destiny power at this critical moment. The destiny power's effect was not like other energies that could resist the silver giant. If it was just a direct confrontation, it would be too low class. Fate didn't care about resisting anything. Fate directly changed the course of events. Chu Tian's soul should have been destroyed, but it wasn't. The silver giant's attack shouldn't have been blocked, but it was blocked and disappeared. There was no principle. There was no rule. Fate took drastic measures to remove the firewood from under the pot. It forcefully changed the result. Just like when two people were debating whether 1 + 1 = 2 or not, someone called fate jumped out and changed the question to 1 - 1. This was how heaven-defying the power of fate was. This was how powerful the power of fate was. It could ignore all existing laws and existences, directly changing and erasing them from the source. If someone could truly control the power of fate, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be changed. There was no one in this world that couldn't be killed, all laws and laws were nothing but jokes in front of them. They could be created with a flip of their hand and destroyed with a flip of their hand. This kind of existence was a true god. The seed of destiny power had already sprouted in Chu Tian's body. However, it wasn't very powerful at the moment, and the amount of power that Chu Tian could use was even less. After barely dealing with the silver giant's earth-shattering attack, Chu Tian's destiny power was almost completely exhausted. Die! Chu Tian gathered all the energy that was involved, and like a needle, he stabbed it into the core of the consciousness body. Chu Tian directly erased the most fundamental part of the consciousness body. The consciousness body could not resist this attack at all, and it let out a hysterical cry. The divine sense crystal in the moon god ruins exploded. The entire silver giant exploded. Countless condensed spiritual consciousnesses once again turned into a raging ocean, instantly submerging Chu Tian within it. Chu Tian's eyes returned to normal. Although there didn't seem to be any external injuries, the injury this time was more serious than any other time. Although the power of destiny was very powerful, the backlash it caused was also very shocking. Chu Tian's soul and mind were already riddled with holes. Fortunately, Chu Tian's target was the consciousness body. The divine sense crystal in the moon god's ruins was slowly being refined by the flames, turning into strands of energy that were absorbed by Chu Tian. Because his soul had just been injured, there was still time to repair it. Divine sense, a large amount of divine sense, and the moon god's source divine sense all rushed over. This divine sense was several hundred to 1,000 times stronger than the one he encountered in the death ice field. Chu Tian was like a giant sponge holding onto the divine sense crystal, letting the divine sense crystal melt and seep into his body. Chu Tian's cultivation began to wildly increase. This body that had been modified by the demon god had a perfect foundation, and now he had swallowed the moon god's power. Chu Tian's cultivation broke through to the 9th true spirit layer without any suspense. Hong! A vast energy filled the entire moon god's ruins. The moon god guards that were desperately trying to revive suddenly felt like light bulbs that had been turned off. The intense tremors spread from the moon god ruins to the entire moon, and all of the moon race creatures seemed to be frozen in place. This was because the will that was affecting them had already disappeared. The attacks of these moon race monsters were greatly reduced. When the moon finished shaking, a powerful aura was released. There was a mist-like energy that passed through the surface of the moon, instantly covering a large area. What is that? Quickly look. The people of the continent looked up. There was a 9-eyed demon god's shadow in the sky. The 9 eyes were like high-up gods, coldly looking down at the lowly life forms on the ground. Big brother Chu Tian has broken through. Vivian excitedly said in Miracle City, but isn't he making too much noise, letting the entire continent see him? Nan Gongyun laughed, our boss is just this willful. Meng Qingguo and Meng Yingying both revealed looks of joy. The more exaggerated this phenomenon was, the harder it was to break through and the greater the harvest. Chu Tian had gone from the true spirit realm to the heaven domain realm. He had gone from being one of the top experts on the continent to being one of the strongest experts on the continent. This was a qualitative leap, this was a giant breakthrough. Actually, Chu Tian was in charge of all of Miracle Commerce's resources. Even if there were no fortuitous encounters, with the resources accumulated by the company, he would still reach the heaven domain realm in half a year. Breaking through in the moon god's ruins was something to celebrate, but what was even more precious to Chu Tian was that because he had swallowed the moon god's remnant divine sense, Chu Tian's divine sense had grown by a large amount. It had now surpassed the vision domain realm and reached the undying realm. Hyperfocus, mind's eye, mind's lamp, vision domain, undying. Chu Tian's divine sense had reached the 5th realm. Not to mention this era, even in the ancient era, it was very rare. There were some demons and gods that only had undying divine sense. When a being's divine sense reached the undying realm, this being's body and spirit would have a fundamental change. In other words, Chu Tian's dependence on his body had decreased by a large amount. Even if his body suffered a fatal injury, Chu Tian's soul wouldn't immediately dissipate. Even if his head was heavily injured, Chu Tian's ability to think wouldn't be interrupted. This was the benefit of the undying divine sense. Chu Tian gradually broke free of his body's bindings. He was a being that transcended ordinary living beings. Even if his soul left his body, he could still exist for a long time. Now that his head was gone, he could still think. His divine sense wouldn't scatter and his soul wouldn't be extinguished. To other beings, this was simply unimaginable. Chapter 6:17. Chu Tian gradually restrained his aura and woke up. When he opened his eyes, there was a 9-colored glow in his eyes. Eunice, Lancelot, and the others that participated in the exploration of the moon god's ruins were all gathered beside Chu Tian. They all had different expressions, but the only thing they had in common was shock and admiration. Could they not be shocked? They were all heaven domain experts and their cultivations weren't low. Who among them could create a heaven-shaking momentum like Chu Tian when they broke through to the heaven domain realm? Not to mention them, even in history, they had never heard of a precedent like this. Could they not be filled with admiration? Chu Tian had directly fought against the core consciousness of the moon in the moon god's ruins. This consciousness was formed from the moon god's divine sense and remnant soul fragments. Spiritual gods were immortal existences and they had never heard of any power that could kill a spiritual god. This consciousness could be considered a demigod existence, but it was actually personally killed by Chu Tian. Everyone looked at the nine-colored light and they couldn't help trembling. It was like being stared at by a demon god, they couldn't help feeling awe and shock. Chu Tian immediately restrained the light and returned to normal, even restraining his aura even more than before. Actually, after reaching the heaven domain realm, the nine-eyed demon god's power had truly awakened and he could now fully display the power of the nine-eyed demon god source spirit. The heaven domain realm and true spirit realm was not just the difference in strength, it was also the difference between high and low. Even a short-lived human could live for 801,000 years once they entered the heaven domain realm. This human's growth speed was too terrifying. Lancelot remembered that when Chu Tian first came to the Forest of Chaos a year ago, he was only an awakened soul cultivator that hadn't even reached the true spirit realm. In less than 2 years, he had actually completed a path that most elves wouldn't be able to complete in 200 years. The continent had another heaven domain expert. The continent had another peak expert. Lancelot said with a faint smile, "Congratulations to the city lord for making a large breakthrough in your cultivation." Thunder's Fury, Burst Claw, Death Wing, and Bo Sha came to congratulate him. If Chu Tian hadn't reached the heaven domain realm, no matter how high Chu Tian's status was, the 5 giants would still be biased against him. But now that Chu Tian had reached the heaven domain realm, whether it was status or ability, he was on equal footing with them. This time Chu Tian's breakthrough was not just a personal breakthrough, it was also a breakthrough for Miracle City. Chu Tian would establish himself as the highest leader of the Forest of Chaos and Miracle City would become the core of the Forest of Chaos. Chu Tian nodded, "It's all thanks to everyone that I was able to break through this bottleneck. I'll repay everyone when I get back." "How is the situation at the Moon God's ruins?" Eunice seemed to be very excited. After the city lord defeated the divine sense's parent body, all the moon god guards are no longer repairing themselves. We can now control the moon god palace and excavate the moon god's ruins treasures. Chu Tian glanced to the side. There was a dim ball of light quietly floating there. The moon god's parent body had already stopped working and these powerful moon god guards had temporarily lost their ability to regenerate, but their source had not been destroyed just because the moon god's parent body was destroyed. Chu Tian released his divine sense and poured it into the moon god guard's source. His divine sense could easily connect to the moon god guard without any rejection. With a thought from Chu Tian, the moon god guard's source body lit up and wildly absorbed energy from the surroundings, turning into a giant in just a short while. Eunice revealed a look of shock. "This is..." Chu Tian said with a faint smile, "Your Majesty, there is no need to be shocked. I've refined the moon god's parent body and although I can't control all the moon's creatures like the moon god's parent body, I can still reconstruct some life forms and change their movements, making them less aggressive." After the moon god guard was regenerated, it stood there like a block of wood, like it didn't see them at all. Chu Tian had this kind of ability, he could control all the moon's life forms. On the moon, Chu Tian could be considered an invincible existence. It was a pity he couldn't bring him to the surface, otherwise with just the army of the moon's life forms, Chu Tian could declare an empire. From today on, the moon god's palace and the moon god's ruins will be guarded by the Dark Night Elves. I will build a transport tower for the moon god's palace that will be connected to the Dark Night Forest in the future. Chu Tian already controlled the entire moon. If Chu Tian went back on his word, Eunice couldn't do anything. But Chu Tian didn't do this. The Dark Night Forest was one of the most influential powers on the continent and Chu Tian didn't want the alliance to become enemies with the Dark Night Elves for a little benefit, it wasn't worth it. The moon god's palace was useless to the alliance. Moon God's ruins? It couldn't be denied that the inheritance, resources, and wealth were shocking, but the moon race's inheritance wasn't very useful to the Alliance. As for the shocking amount of wealth, although it was very attractive, with Miracle City's current position, how could they not be able to buy a few immortal herbs? Not to mention that the moon god's ruins were only guarded by the Dark Night Elves and the excavations would have to be done with Miracle City's moon base. The Dark Night Elves couldn't eat it alone. Chu Tian killing the main consciousness body was a huge contribution to the opening of the ruins. Since we've come here, we can't leave empty-handed. Chu Tian directed everyone as he said, let's first do a simple exploration of the moon god's ruins. The Dragon Lord and the others wished for this. The moon god's ruins would be the Dark Night Elves and Miracle City's resource area in the future. The other powers couldn't find a suitable reason to take a share, so it was better to take a few immortal herbs back. It would be enough for them to break through. Everyone split up. They each explored the ruins. Chu Tian's attention was attracted by the fragments on the ground. These fragments were left behind by the Divine Sense Crystal. Chu Tian told the little fox to collect the Divine Sense fragments. These fragments didn't have any value to Chu Tian, but they were priceless to others. The Divine Sense Crystal was condensed from the Divine Sense Source. The Divine Sense Source could be directly absorbed. In other words, each fragment of the Divine Sense Crystal could be used to directly increase one's Divine Sense. Chu Tian brought the fragments back for the young miss and the others to use. He didn't dare say that their divine sense would be very strong, but they would at least be able to easily break through to the mind's lamp realm. Little fox, we can't come here for nothing. Chu Tian put away the several fragments of the Divine Sense Crystal. Look around. If there are any good herbs, just take them back. There's no need to trouble yourself in the future. The little fox had this thought and immediately began to sniff around to search for treasures. Chu Tian followed behind the little fox and in just a short while, he had already picked 10 high-grade immortal herbs. Whether these immortal herbs were for Chu Tian's own cultivation or for others to use, they were all very valuable. The little fox suddenly smelled something special and excitedly gestured at Chu Tian a few times. Chu Tian didn't even have time to understand before it impatiently went deeper into the moon god's ruins. Little fox, slow down. What is going on? What did you find? The little fox walked into a cave. There was a medium-sized pool in this cave and there was a translucent silver liquid flowing in the pool. Chu Tian could feel that this was an ancient god's blood essence and spinal cord. It could be considered a supreme immortal treasure that could change one's physique, allowing one to transcend mortal bodies. This pool was covered with a large number of silver leaves, and each leaf could be considered an immortal treasure. In the center of the countless leaves, there was a full and beautiful silver flower. This rosewood released an extremely rare aura. Spiritual god aura. Chu Tian could basically affirm that this was a precious medicine with a divine nature. In simpler terms, a divine medicine. Chapter 618. The continent's materials were divided into normal grade, spirit grade, sacred grade, immortal grade, and god grade. Among these materials, especially the herbs, as long as they were old enough, they could all become elixirs. Sacred herbs had very strict requirements for growing, so they could only be produced in a specific place. As for immortal herbs, not only did they need a long nurturing time and a harsh environment, they also needed a heaven-defying opportunity to be born. Therefore, they could only be found and not sought. The herb in front of Chu Tian was actually a divine herb that had already awakened its divinity. Although it couldn't be considered a complete divine herb, it was at least on the level of a demigod. How precious was a divine herb? There weren't many of them on the entire continent. This was because divine herbs had divinity and should have existed in the same era as demons and gods. After the great desolate continent was destroyed, the continent didn't have an environment to cultivate divine herbs at all. The reason this herb could reach its current level was mainly because it had been nurtured by the moon god's spirit and essence. After being nurtured for tens of thousands of years, it finally reached its current level. This was a herb that was about to become a divine herb. Even if all the immortal herbs that Chu Tian had collected were added up, they couldn't compare to this one. Chu Tian couldn't help revealing a faint smile. "Fox, you're really something. I'll remember your great merit this time and you'll be heavily rewarded when we return." The little fox drooled as it stared at the divine herb. But for this divine herb, it didn't even think about it. This fellow was a rice bucket. Was there a difference if it ate good or bad? If the little fox ate a demigod herb, it would be better to give it 1,000 sacred herbs to eat. The added effect was the same as eating a demigod herb for the little fox. With Miracle Commerce's current ability, although it wasn't easy to collect 1,000 level 4 sacred herbs, finding a level 4 divine herb was something that could only be found. Chu Tian reached out his hand and grabbed the air. The demigod herb was instantly covered by an invisible energy. Hong! A low and deep explosion rang out at this time as the herb released a strong light. There was a strong energy that instantly shattered Chu Tian's energy. Chu Tian was slightly surprised. There was hostility coming from within the precious medicine. It was resisting Chu Tian's grasp. It turned out that this stock of divine medicine had already formed its own consciousness after countless years and possessed the ability to think. If Chu Tian wanted to pluck it away, how could it not display hostility? The entire cave began to tremble. Before Chu Tian could do anything, the precious medicine suddenly blossomed with a light that didn't disperse. This layer of light formed a huge silhouette around it. It was the image of a silver qilin. This silver qilin was not a corporeal entity. It was purely an illusion of energy. However, the energy contained within the qilin's body was not weak. Its might was no different from a real qilin. Roar! The qilin let out an angry roar, causing the entire cave to shake. It leapt up and seemed to stir up a storm, violently and fiercely smashing into Chu Tian. Chu Tian pulled out the divine demon sword from the void and slashed out with the black sword. The instant the two forces collided, Chu Tian was blasted back 100 feet and slammed into the stone wall. The moon didn't have any rock formations. This crystal wall was as hard as steel, but Chu Tian was like a knife stabbing into a cake, easily sinking in. There were several dozen meters of cracks all around him. The might of this attack could be seen from this. Spatial fluctuations. Chu Tian was directly sent out. Although he had suffered a fierce attack, his expression was still calm. The starlight immortal body had been strengthened and the power of the demon and god had changed it, so Chu Tian's physique had already surpassed the limits of mortals. Although the silver qilin's attack was very fierce, it didn't harm Chu Tian at all. This attack could roughly deduce the strength of the illusionary beast, which was around the 6th to 7th heaven domain layer. Chu Tian had indeed reached the heaven domain realm, but he was only in the 1st heaven domain layer. If he wanted to deal with this monster, it would be a bit difficult. The silver qilin's claw slapped the ground and it was prepared to jump up again. Fox, go! The little fox turned into a demonic fox and collided with the qilin. The two monsters began to fight in the cave. After the little fox turned into a demonic fox, its battle strength reached the heaven domain realm. Although it was weaker than the silver qilin, one couldn't forget that the silver qilin wasn't a real body and was formed from energy. The demonic fox bit the silver qilin's body and the light around it quickly dimmed. The silver qilin's body exploded at this time and splashed in front of the little fox like water. It gathered above its head and turned into a silver phoenix. This weak silver phoenix fell into the pond and spread its wings to fly up. In the blink of an eye, the silver phoenix's energy was completely restored. Hong! The silver phoenix spread its wings, and its body continued to explode, as if hundreds of bombs had been detonated. The surface of its body continued to erupt with silver flames, and the flames did not dissipate. All of them condensed together, and in the end, the silver phoenix turned into a blinding sun, releasing intense light and energy. This fellow was trying to self-destruct. Once this attack was released, the entire area would be flattened. Even the little fox would find it hard to block the self-destruction of the silver phoenix. The entire process was too fast. The little fox wanted to stop it, but it was already too late. The wild energy was about to be released. Chu Tian's eyes turned silver. At this time, energy that couldn't be seen with the naked eye was released from Chu Tian. It was like a small stone being thrown into a space and time domain, creating ripples. Under the pressure of several invisible ripples, the small sun that was about to explode suddenly stopped expanding, like it was being suppressed. Chu Tian didn't forcefully suppress it, and he didn't have any way to forcefully suppress it. Time freezing. Time energy. Chu Tian released his time energy and disturbed the flow of time, increasing the time it took to self-destruct by several times. This gave the little fox a chance. The demon fox released a beam of light that hit the ball of energy that didn't explode in time, instantly shattering the ball of energy. The high-density energy was completely shattered. The silver phoenix gave a sharp cry and turned into a silver flood dragon, drilling out of the center of the fireball. It fell into a pool of water once again, absorbing energy from the inside. Would there be no end to this fight? Chu Tian raised the demon god's sword and slashed out in the air. An invisible spatial slash slashed at the silver flood dragon's head, and an unstoppable strength instantly shattered its head. The demon fox seized this chance to jump out, and its body expanded in the air. Just like a fox biting a snake, it bit the flood dragon in its mouth. Then it turned into a gray mist that disappeared, teleporting in front of Chu Tian. The flood dragon still tried to struggle. Chu Tian didn't give it a chance. His eyes gradually turned golden, and a wild divine sense attacked the silver flood dragon's divine sense. In front of the Undying Realm's divine sense, the silver flood dragon's divine sense couldn't even take a single blow and was instantly erased by Chu Tian's power. The light from the silver flood dragon's body gradually disappeared, and it finally turned into a complete herb on the ground. Chu Tian let out a long sigh. He bent down to pick up the herb. This herb was born from the moon god's spirit, so it already has a very strong divinity, but I never thought that it would awaken its own consciousness. If I was a bit weaker, I really wouldn't have been able to do anything to it. The demon fox turned back into a little fox. The master ate the meat and the fox drank the soup. The little fox didn't expect to obtain the divine herb. The pond was filled with plants, and they were all high-grade immortal treasures. The little fox wasn't polite with Chu Tian, it jumped over and took everything to fill its own pockets. We can take these immortal leaves, but we can't touch the immortal essence in the pond. We'll leave it for Yingying and the young miss, it can help them break through to the heaven domain realm in the future. Chu Tian knew what kind of personality the little fox had. If it didn't obtain any benefits at all, the next time he needed help, it might act up and not help. Exploring the moon god's ruins. Chu Tian and the little fox's harvests weren't small. Chu Tian collected 16 high-grade level 3 immortal herbs, 8 top-grade level 3 immortal herbs, 5 low and medium-grade level 4 immortal herbs, and 2 high-grade level 4 immortal herbs. Although Miracle City had several dozen immortal herbs, they were all level 3 immortal herbs. They were mostly mid and low grade, mainly suitable for cultivators under the 7th true spirit layer to quickly increase their strength. This time, Chu Tian didn't pick any high-grade immortal herbs, therefore the immortal herbs he took were all high-grade level 3 immortal herbs. This level and quality of immortal herbs could help cultivators above the 7th true spirit layer quickly increase their strength. As for the top-grade level 3 immortal herbs, they could help them break through realms. In other words, Chu Tian gave a batch of immortal herbs to everyone, basically guaranteeing Yingying, the young miss, Vivian, Nangong Yun, and the other core members of the true spirit realm. They would definitely be able to reach the heaven domain realm in a year. As for the level 4 immortal herbs, they were even more precious. After Chu Tian reached the heaven domain realm, it was hard for him to find herbs that could increase his cultivation because there were very few level 4 and above materials on the continent. Almost all level 4 materials had saint-grade medicinal effects. Normal Saint-grade materials had limited effects on a Heaven Domain cultivator's cultivation, not to mention they could only be found and not sought. This was why the 5 leaders of the Alliance had lived for so long, but they were still stuck in the 6th to 7th Heaven Domain layer. It was hard for them to progress any further, and they would stay at this level for the rest of their lives. Level 4 immortal herbs could effectively increase Chu Tian's strength. These herbs could at least satisfy his cultivation needs for a period of time in the future. Chu Tian had already finished the exploration of the moon's ruins, so he said goodbye to the Dark Knight Elven King Eunice. He brought the 5 leaders who were also full of rewards and returned to Miracle City through the transport array. The City Lord's strength had broken through. This was a joyous matter for Miracle City. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.